Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of the Planning and Highways Committee. I'll hand over to Abby for housekeeping.
Thank you, Chair. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please take instruction from staff and stewards. The assembly point is Tudor Square. Please can I request everyone to switch mobile devices to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. The meeting today will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. While ever the meeting is open to the public, photography, video and sound recording of the proceedings is permitted. However, the Chair has discretion to withdraw or suspend this permission, for example, if the recording is disrupting the conduct of the meeting or is being undertaken in a manner which could capture personal information, or in the event that a member of the public participating in the meeting objects to being recorded. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have any apologies for absence, Abby?
Yes, we've had apologies from Councillor Diane Hurst today and Councillor Tony Downing is substituting.
Thank you. I don't see any problems for press or public, no? Thank you. Item 4, declaration of interest. I'll make a declaration. Ravent Limited, which are involved in the Kenwood Hotel. Many years ago, I knew the managing director of that, so I will declare that. I've not spoken to him for years, and I don't have anything to do with him anymore. Oh, thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. On item 7B, I must declare a prejudicial interest as I was briefly involved in campaigning to retain the community garden, so I'll not be speaking or voting on that item.
Thanks, Mike. Nigat?
I'm declaring interest with the 17 Aberdeen Road because I've given my objections to that, so I won't be speaking or taking part in that as well.
Thank you. Sophie?
Thank you. I am objective to the matter, but just for the interest of observed bias.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, I'm sorry, could you just repeat that because I couldn't hear it because the microphones wasn't there.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah. Just to say that I'm going to be withdrawing from the Cobden view item. I am objective to the situation, but my employer has submitted an objection.
Thank you. We'll introduce each member and go around in order. I'm Alan Woodcock, member for East Ecclesfield, and today I'm chairing this meeting. If we start with you, Mike, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Chaplin. I'm a councillor for Southey Ward.
It's Brian. It's very loud. It's Brian Holshaw, who is a councillor for Brumhill and Sherrvale Ward.
Hi, I'm the councillor for Netheredge and Sherrill Ward.
I'm Tony Downs, I'm councillor for Southey Ward.
Peter Price, member for Shire Green Brightside.
Tony Downey, member for Mosborough.
Derek, start with you.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Gary Weatherall for Shire Green and Brightside Ward.
Bob?
Councillor Bob McCann, member for Bayton Ward.
Roger?
Roger Davison, member for Ecclesall Ward.
Sophie?
Sophie Wilson, member for Park and Arbthorne Ward.
Barbara?
Barbara Masters, member for Ecclesall Ward.
Cliff?
Cliff Woodcraft, elected member for Fulwood Ward.
Thank you. Right. Item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. I'll go through them page by page. Page 9. 10. 11. 12. 13. 14, I think, 15. That's it, thank you. Dates of site visits will be confirmed to members direct by the calendar. We have 4 applications to hear today. The first one is number 22/01397/FUL 268 Handsworth Road and land to the rear of 270 Sheffield. Chris? Oh, sorry, not Christian. Lucy, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just move the presentation onto the site plan? That's lovely. Just leave it at that for the moment. So, Chair, this is a proposal to permanently utilise this site for car sales and car storage. There is a previous history of temporary uses for part of the site, and then latterly for the whole site, including the area to the rear of the established car wash, which fronts onto Handsworth Road. And members will recall, the ones that were part of the committee last year, that an earlier application was withdrawn before the committee, and that did have a refusal recommendation at the time. The main change with this current application is that it is supported by an acoustic assessment, and it includes a proposal to install a 2.1 metre acoustic fence. I'll run through the presentation when I've just done this brief introduction to show you where that would be. And it's been amended during the course of the application to cover the whole of the boundary between the site and the houses that are on Parsley Hay Gardens, and we'll come on to some photographs later of the relationship. The noise report actually concludes that this fence is not technically necessary in this case, but the applicant has offered it as a way of appeasing residents' concerns. It will lead to a 15 dBA reduction in the noise experienced at those properties, when actually the worst case assessment is that the use will only increase background noise levels by around 2 decibels. And in terms of worst case scenario, the baseline figures for the general noise environment were taken in the middle of the day on a Friday, so that it essentially, Handsworth Road would be at a quieter point. Obviously, if that survey had been done first thing in the morning in the rush hour, it would have come up with a noisier background level. So the applicants have done a fair assessment to use a lower background noise level and then added the noise of the operations onto that. As well as the acoustic properties of the fence, it will have an attractive finish in timber, very much like a sturdy garden fence, I suppose, is what it would be. I'll show you some images later. And it would screen both the noise activities and also provide a privacy screen. Obviously, there are substantial objections, and a lot of those are around noise and privacy concerns. It is acknowledged that the properties to the rear of the site are at a lower level. So the fence will be set into the site with landscaping and a bund maintained in between the fence and the garden boundaries to the properties to the rear, and that would be approximately 3 metres in distance. The gardens are to the southwest of the site, so they wouldn't suffer from loss of sunlight, but obviously we have to consider whether there are any overbearing impacts. But setting it in to that level, we don't think that that would lead to any sort of eye-line sight issues when you're looking from the gardens up towards the fence, because there are, as you'll see from the photographs, fences to the garden boundaries as well. Obviously, we very much appreciate the strength of feeling, but with the new evidence and the proposals that are presented, there's no evidential basis that we consider with which we could reject the proposals. I'll just move on to the supplementary report, Chair. That's item number 1 on the supplementary report. We've had an additional representation from a local resident in terms of wanting the acoustic fence extending for the whole length of the plot, and that has been addressed now, and that is the case on the revised proposals, because they talk about noise and disturbance from the cabin, and when we look at the photographs shortly, you'll be able to see where that is. We've also had an additional representation from Clive Betts. So it's recognised that the officer report indicates an understanding of the noise and disturbance issues, but remains concerned about 2 issues. He was also concerned about the acoustic fence running the whole length of the site rather than only part way along, and as I said earlier, that has been addressed now and it does run the whole length of the boundary. But it's still concerned about the ability of employees and customers to look into people's gardens and to look straight into first floor windows. The screen would not allow, it's 2.1 metres high, so people would certainly not be able to look into the gardens of anybody's homes. If you stand further back, you would potentially be able to look into the upstairs windows, but that's not dissimilar to most other situations with first floor windows. He expresses that there's a need to put distance between the boundary and the acoustic fence and where vehicles are parked, so that there is a gap between where the sales staff meet and talk. So I think his idea was that you should put some sort of knee rail barrier even further into the site. We don't think that is necessary. Chair, in terms of the response to the representations, as I say, apart from the fact that the fence has been extended, we've covered all the other issues extensively in the report. Just a couple of other issues. The report mentions Circular 1195 in relation to granting of temporary planning permissions, and that actually has been superseded by guidance that's in the National Planning Practice Guidance, but it does result in a similar assessment that you shouldn't justify granting a second temporary planning permission. You need a clear rationale for granting temporary planning permission. So further permissions should normally be granted permanently or refused if there is a clear justification for doing so. But that's just to correct that anomaly in the report. Chair, we're proposing a revision to condition 2 to allow for a gate to be provided within the acoustic fencing, because obviously it's recognised that the landscaping needs to be maintained. So we're proposing a small revision to condition 2. Directive 4 was a bit unclear, so we're proposing to insert some wording at the beginning of that, just to say that, to explain that that is an advisory note to help them in relation to condition 5. Proposing an additional condition in relation to the landscaping. We realised that we'd not put for the long-term maintenance of that, so we're proposing a condition to cover that. And also, members spotted what they suspected was some Japanese knotweed on the site when they went on a visit. We have, from photographic evidence, had that confirmed that it is, so we're adding a directive in respect of the treatment of that. It's not specifically a planning consideration, but obviously it's helpful for the owner of the site to realise that that is present on the site. Chair, in terms of the presentation, so you've got the aerial view up there at the moment. The area that's to the south of where the cars are parked on the aerial view, obviously this is an aerial view that's not up to date, because the area to the south that's also in the red line boundary is completely covered in cars now. That is the area that's used for the storage of cars. If you move on to the next slide, this shows the bund that I referred to. So the proposed acoustic fence would be on the right-hand side of the bund as you look at it. So the bund would stay in place. That's partly there for reasons of drainage containment. So that was done as part of the overall drainage works. So the fence would be on the inner part of that, so on the side of that. Again, another photograph again shows the level difference actually quite well between the site and the houses below. So that image was taken in winter time, so you can see that when the planting isn't in leaf, then those properties were quite exposed, which is why a boundary fence from a privacy and security point of view is a good idea. If you move on to the next one, this just is a longer distance from the site, more towards Handsworth Road, but looking back towards the roofs of the houses, you can see there, and that's the storage area that I referred to before that's been resurfaced and drainage put in. The next one, that is the original part of the site. So at the back of the site, you can see the storage cabin that's referred to, and an acoustic fence would be going behind that there. And also, I'm not sure whether it's the next image that that's another one that shows the bund and the boundary between the properties. These are some images again looking back towards the houses. These were taken on the members' site visit, so it shows the vegetation is a bit more in leaf, obviously, than those previous images that were taken in the winter. If we move on to the next one again, actually the one on the left-hand bottom side, that shows behind the cabin between the houses and the site. That portable toilet block would be moved. I'll show you the site plan later in the presentation, and the acoustic fence would go behind that cabin so that there would no longer be activity between the cabin and the gardens that are on the opposite side of there. The next one, these were taken, helpfully the residents on the members' site visit let members go into the rear of the properties, so these do show you the level difference between the gardens of the properties and the site above. So that's to illustrate that level difference, which is about 3 metres, I think about 3 metres between the site. So the site plan here is, because of it's not particularly big and you're not particularly close to it, it's difficult for you to pick out, but there is a blue line which denotes exactly where the acoustic fence would go. So that would be to the south of the planting line, and then there'd be a kink back towards the properties, so where number 22 is, and then running behind the storage cabin. So it'd run all along that site. So in this image, the white area is the car storage area, and the pink area is the sales area, and then obviously there's customer parking and the running lane shown there as well. So the last image there is of an image of the proposed acoustic fence. So it looks similar to a garden fence, but obviously it's got acoustic properties. Chair, that's where the presentation ends. Perhaps it would be helpful to linger on probably the site plan. I think that one that one would probably be the helpful one to linger on just for the moment, Chair. So if that's okay, that's my presentation.
Thank you, Lucy. We have some speakers for and against this, so I'd like to invite Leslie Ward. She'd come forward to one of the desks, please.
I have some photos of the site that are taken from a view from the bungalows and the rear of the properties, which are a bit more enlightening than the ones that have appeared on there, if that's all right for me to pass them round.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you. Right, Leslie, you've got 5 minutes to present your...
I'll do my best to get it all in. I'm a bit nervous, so I might run over a little.
Thank you.
Right. Acceptance for the original permission was made on comments that were misleading and generic. These were no privacy issues, no overlooking will occur, there would be a visual improvement, there has been no visual improvement, and the site is overwhelming. Proximity of the residents and difference in height to the site, there are direct views into bedroom windows at a distance of 9 metres and views into rear gardens at a distance of 1 metre, which are below the recommended minimum of 18 metres. Other issues: inadequate landscaping drawings. Regarding NPPF paragraph 127F, the quality and character of the area and elements that contribute to the overall enjoyment have been compromised. Consultation with residents has been non-existent. Mature trees have been removed and not replaced like for like, and maintenance has not been forthcoming. Permission for the resiting of the cabin has proved intrusive. Outlook and loss of daylight from the ground floors and gardens have not been taken into consideration by the officer report. The vehicles are jet washed only yards away on Handsworth Road, but no consideration has been given to these residents. The application should have been reviewed on the reason given. However, if it were to be granted, the following should be secured by condition: a 24-hour security monitoring system to protect residents' amenity. The planting at present is not sufficient between the fence and the boundary. Without a condition, there is nothing to prevent this being removed if permission were to be granted. From the gardens, acoustic fencing will feel more than 5 metres high, oppressively high, blocking light, harming outlook and creating a claustrophobic effect. Rear aspect from bedroom windows and gardens will not be improved. All residents, including those to the side and fronting onto Handsworth Road, will still be affected by noise. The background noise study covers a 2-hour period on a Friday. This is completely insufficient and fails to consider the times of day when residents would normally enjoy the quietest moments. The study should cover a full day, both on a weekday and a weekend. As the business is external, weather conditions and time of year should also be taken into consideration. The results of a rainy winter's day would not be the same as a busy summer's day with sunshine. You cannot say with confidence the noise at the site would increase ambient noise levels by just 3 decibels, as the background noise survey was only carried out for 2 hours during a noisy period Friday afternoon. No assessment has been made of impact on Sundays and bank holidays, which is significantly quieter. No figures are given to how many visitors there are to site who do not purchase. Whole families can attend the viewings with associated car noise, talking, laughing and joking with staff. Permanent permission will present a green light to operate as they wish. Their determination has already been confirmed by numerous enforcements. The business is notified before all official visits to site by Sheffield City Council, including the performing of the acoustic survey. This prejudices the true everyday working nature of the business. It would seem that noise and intrusion are deemed acceptable because they occur during the day. Already, overflow from the car sales is appearing along with car transporting at other premises on Handsworth Road. This matter has been forced onto the residents through no fault of our own and has gone on for years. We call for an ending to it all and for peace and privacy to return to our estate.
Thank you, Lucy. If you'd like to return to your seat. Our next speaker is Councillor Diane Hurst. Diane, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'm speaking today as a ward member because I've worked with these residents for the last 4 years since the temporary permissions were granted, because it was my intent to get the business to behave like a good neighbour. And officers have worked very hard in enforcement, but unfortunately that hasn't come about. And I think it's because there are some unsurmountable barriers to the operation of this business where it is. The properties on Parsley Hay Gardens have got small, the property on Parsley Hay Gardens have got small gardens. They have got small gardens. They were built in the mid-80s when plot sizes reduced greatly. I went out last week and I measured the length of the garden. I got into 2 properties. One was a 5 metre long garden. Another was 5 metre, increasing to 8 metres at the first floor. Though those aren't very, very big distances. And given that this development is next to Laverack Street, if you know the area, you'll know Laverack Street. It's like that. It's where the driving instructors take you to do your hill starts, and where your hill start used to be taken as part of your test. But the gardens on Parsley Hay Gardens don't go like that. They go like that. So you've got a 5 metre garden, then going up 3.3 metres, the one that could clamber up. And the other one, I used an app on my phone, and I think that's about 3.5 metres up. So the business is operating, as it has already been acknowledged, at bedroom window level. The site visits and officers' reports will tell you what that's done, the quiet enjoyment and amenity value that residents have, both now and in the future if you grant this permission. Because this isn't just for work days, it's for Sundays and bank holidays as well. I got a phone call I got a message on Wednesday saying, we're sat in our conservatory, we're trying to listen to the television. We can't hear the television because there's a car engine running on the site. And I got a message when it stopped 45 minutes later. Now, this is a car sales business. It has a right to move cars out for viewing. It has a right to move cars back. It has a right to make sure that any running difficulties are attended to and that the batteries don't go flat. I'm not trying to say anything about the running, but if someone sat in their own conservatory giving onto the back garden can't hear their television through walls and double glazing, what will a close-bordered fence do to keep sound out? Residents already say they can't enjoy their back gardens because of the operation of the business. Since the temporary permissions expired, I've had 45 reports from residents of alarms. Residents have given more to officers as well, and one of those was found to be a car. All the rest have been found to be an alarm associated with the cabin, with the operation of the premises of the business. It went off, I got an email on Easter Monday, it went off before 8, it went off before 9 on May Day. They worked all through the Jubilee, so while other people were having street parties and family round on their back gardens, they were listening, as I was when I went round last week, to people shouting across the site, talking to each other on the site. You could hear things being moved about, you could hear things being dropped, because that was that person's working environment. It's not like when the kids were little, you'd say, oh, turn the telly down and be careful how you close that door. This is that person's working environment, 7 days a week. On Thompson Hill, there were 3 houses that we refused permission for last year. And we gave them because of the amenity impact of car parking next to rear gardens, 3 houses. And the inspector upheld that the car movements of 3 houses would unreasonably impact on the peaceful enjoyment of people's rear gardens.
Diane.
This is a business
for your
It had,
5
they
minutes,
sell 6
Diane.
cars. I'll make one final point quickly. 6 cars a day. My son's just driven 10 cars to purchase one. So is that 100 movements a day? What impact will that have on these residents? Final point, promise. There's another car sales showroom down the road where it used to be the old Peugeot garage. 45 complaints about this in the 4 months of this year. How many complaints about that garage in the 6 years I've been a local member? None. Because the land levels are different and because it's a bigger site. Please refuse this application and allow the land to be used for something else and give these residents back the peaceful enjoyment of their own home and restore the amenity value of their homes. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Our next speaker is Susan Crowley, who's speaking for the application.
Thank you, Chair.
5 minutes, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think Lucy's given a really clear presentation on the scheme, and so I'm not going to cover that again, if you don't mind. I would like to respond to residents' comments with reference the noise and disturbance that they've been experiencing. And we understand where they're coming from. Everybody has a right to enjoy their property and expect an amount of peace and quiet when they're within their property and within their garden areas. That's absolutely a given. So we do understand where they're coming from. But our job as the applicant's agent in this instance was to advise the applicant using the best available evidence to us. And in this instance, that evidence needed to be centred on noise. And so we commissioned the noise survey that has been submitted with the current application. And whilst I appreciate that local residents consider it perhaps wasn't taken or undertaken in accordance with their aspirations or objectives, I would like to guarantee you that the noise survey has been undertaken in accordance with normal standards and procedures. And as far as I'm aware, the Environmental Protection Services Unit at Sheffield City Council has accepted its findings and found them to be robust. So I think we do need to take that on board because they are the experts in the matter. Had there been any concerns about the noise impact assessment, we would have certainly revisited it. And there has been no communication with us on that, so we can only assume that your own experts are happy with its contents. I'd like to also address the issues I think both speakers before me have raised in connection with the matter of enforcement. It's been raised as an issue. As far as I'm aware, and I'm sure Lucy will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there has been any enforcement action taken against this particular site. I think there have been complaints made to the local authority, and I think the Environmental Protection Services Unit has been out with Bob Singh having various discussions with local residents on their concerns, which, again, I fully understand. But as far as I'm aware, and again, Lucy will correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the complaints that have been made were upheld because certainly the operation did not cease on site throughout the temporary consents. I'd like to just talk about the height of the fence briefly as well, if I may, in response to residents' concerns, and again, I can understand them. There's a photograph Lucy showed in her presentation, and I'm not quite sure where it sits in the slideshow here, but it was very telling. It was from one of the rear gardens on Parsley Hay. If we can go back again, because I think it shows forward, it was the next slide. That's lovely, thank you. It shows in the rear gardens there the actual height of the existing landscaping that's been planted adjacent their boundary. You can see there the top of that landscaping and the view through and over it. The fence will sit behind that landscaping to such a degree you actually won't see it. Your line of view will sail over the top of that landscaping, and there will be no sense at all that the acoustic fence is there, because we have taken care to set it back into the site far enough behind the bund for that to be the case, so it won't be visually intrusive at all from within the rear gardens, because again, I can fully appreciate what that might have felt like. You don't want another 2-metre fence on top of a 3-metre retaining wall, certainly. I can totally accept that. And then there's been reference made to an appeal for 3 houses being upheld in terms of traffic movements in proximity to neighbouring properties and their boundaries and causing disturbance. Again, I can understand why that might have been the case. I think what we have to remember here really is that we're dealing with a site in a commercial area. It's been zoned as commercial. And unfortunately, there's a juxtaposition here, which we think can be managed well with the mitigation measures the applicant's proposing and we've advised upon. But at the end of the day, something will have to go on there. And we have a use that is acceptable in principle and we believe can be controlled sufficiently with conditions to address the concerns of residents. And then it will be a matter of the local authority to police that. I get that. But if we're in a situation where we've put mitigation in that all the experts say is acceptable, and if we've got a series of conditions that your own officers consider will help control noise and disturbance in terms of how the site operates, I think we have to take that on board. And finally, if I might say, we are actually, with the acoustic fence, set to cause an overall, or deliver an overall 17 dB reduction in noise, in current ambient noise levels, which means overall it is going to be quieter, full stop. Full stop. Car wash will cause less disturbance. Road traffic noise on Handsworth Road will be reduced. So overall, there's a massive reduction set to be delivered if that acoustic fence goes in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Susan. Well, it's up to members' questions. Oh, sorry. Lou said you had to respond. Sorry.
Yeah, Alan, can you put me down, please?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of Leslie Ward mentioned that consultation with residents had been non-existent. I'm not sure whether she means from the council as local planning authority or from the owner of the site. Obviously, in terms of consultation from the local planning authority, we followed the statement of community involvement. So we certainly have corresponded with residents, explained that the application's in, given them the chance to comment. Obviously, the comments are summarised in detail in the report and at length. So we certainly, as local planning authority, have given residents the chance to speak and to put their views forward. In terms of outlook and views, my feeling is that because the acoustics fence is to be set into the site and beyond the position of the bund, I personally think that the eyeline views from the gardens would mean that you would barely see that fence because of the way it's going to be positioned. So that I don't think that the outlook from the gardens would be impacted in the way that residents suspect they may be, because obviously there are existing boundaries to those gardens. There's then the landscaping strip in between, and then the fence set beyond the drainage bund into the site. In terms of there was mention of the jet wash on Handsworth Road, which is completely separate to this particular application you're looking at. That's an authorised use that is to the front of the site. In terms of security monitoring, there was an alarm. Sorry, I'm just getting my correspondence from the Environmental Protection Service. There was a problem, I think it was back in May, and there were lots of incidents in relation to an alarm, and it was a faulty motion sensor, which is on a building that's close to the hand wash site. So EPS colleagues have been involved in that, and that system is to be upgraded to a 24-hour monitoring system. And obviously the security system would also be fitted with a 20-minute cut-off device. So that's, in a way, that's separate to this planning application, but Environmental Protection Service colleagues have been investigating that matter and making sure that the applicant does something to address that in environmental protection terms. In terms of the background noise survey, as I say, it was taken at a relatively quiet time, and that's important to give almost a worst case scenario, because what they were trying to do, if you took a background noise survey that was, for example, in the rush hour, it would be a lot noisier overall, so the background noise levels wouldn't be reflective of what's there normally. And so if you add the noise of the car operations onto a quieter noise survey, it does actually give the kind of best and fairest impact for residents. That's the best way of monitoring that. And then with the acoustic fence in place, that reduces the decibel count by 15, which is a huge reduction and far more than would be generated by the site itself. In terms of the car company being notified about all visits in advance, that's certainly not the case from our own enforcement officers. They sometimes tell them they're going, they sometimes don't tell them, so not every visit by officers of the council are notified to the applicants. In terms of Councillor Hurst, obviously we acknowledge and appreciate that the gardens to these properties are small. They are short gardens compared to the norm. We've explained that in the report and explained what our view of that is, and in terms of the whether this proposed acoustic fence would be oppressive or not. In terms of bedroom windows, obviously a noise survey has looked at the daytime use, because this site is not operational overnight. So in terms of the World Health Organization requirements to look at noise, it would only be looking at bedroom windows if the business was operating overnight between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. So there isn't actually a requirement to consider those bedroom windows in terms of noise. The noise really during the day is in terms of the living spaces on the ground floor and the garden areas, so that is what we've been concentrating on. Overlooking is a different issue. Obviously a 2.1 metre high fence would not allow any overlooking into garden areas. Yes, you would be able to look over the fence upwards to first floor windows, but that is a normal situation in the vast majority of sites. So in terms of the issue with the car engine running, we've suggested a condition that doesn't occur, but we've also, the close-boarded timber fence, its properties show a 15 dB reduction, so that should resolve that issue in any event. I've already talked about the alarm. Chair, I think that's probably all I need to respond to. I don't need to respond to anything that Susan Crowley said, apart from the enforcement issue. There is an enforcement notice served on the site, but that is in respect of, because the application, the previous application was withdrawn before it came to this committee where we were recommending refusal. The operation is technically unauthorised as it stands. So there's an enforcement notice in terms of ceasing the operation, but that's on hold, obviously because we are dealing with an application to use the site on a permanent basis. So what we haven't done is taken any formal enforcement action against noise and that kind of thing. There is an enforcement notice in place which has been appealed against, but will be pending the outcome of this application in any event. I think that's probably all I need to say in response at the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. I'll open it up to members' questions. I've got Tony first.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask. First of all, taking cognizance of what the officer said earlier about planning permission either being granted or refused now, because reading the summary, planning permission was granted on a temporary basis. Numerous problems occurred, such as floodlights shining into bedrooms, tannoy system installed. I would assume that the temporary planning permission was to test out whether it's made it any better. Obviously, what I've been hearing this afternoon and what I've read, it doesn't seem to have made that part of it any better. That's the first question. I'd like an answer on that if I could. The second question is, and this is something I've had problems with in other areas, especially in my area. Acoustic fence, to my way of thinking, the acoustic fence, what I can see of that is just a wooden fence. I'd like to understand how a wooden fence, all right, it might detract a little bit of noise, but I can't see for the life of me how a wooden fence would make that much difference, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tony. Lucy?
Chair, in terms of the temporary allowance and to check whether things are operational, the thing about this particular application is that they have submitted further evidence and suggested mitigation measures. So that's the difference between the previous temporary consent and this proposed in front of you now. So before we didn't have the proposal for an acoustic fence and we didn't have the noise survey information. So those are two new pieces of evidence that members must take into consideration as part of their deliberations on this application. And with our colleagues in Environmental Protection Service, they are quite clear that the proposals will lead to a satisfactory environment. I'm not the expert in that. My colleagues are. They've looked at this in detail, and that's the advice that they are giving to us. In terms of the acoustic fence, yes, it is a wooden fence, but it's a proper acoustic fence, so it's done by a proper company. There's a specification. That specification is listed in the conditions, so it's a well-known. It's not just any old garden boundary fence. It's a proper acoustic fence. It has the appearance of an attractive garden fence, but it's a proper acoustic fence, and it has to have those properties. So that is listed in the condition, the exact specification for it.
Thank you, sir. I've got Brian next.
So, thank you, Alan. Sorry, I thought I was coming about third, so I wasn't quite ready there. Two questions I'd like to raise is in connection with the container and the toilet area, which seems to be a problematic gathering spot for customers and staff. Can officers clarify the status of the container and the toilet, particularly as I read in the proposal for this site that it is retention of portable building and container, and in brackets, retrospective application. So is this a retrospective application for the container and the toilet area? I've got a second question as well.
Chair, the container's been there for a long time, but yes, it is there. It's been moved further back in the site. The toilet was a more recent addition, but if you look at the layout plan, they're proposing to move that toilet so it's not sitting behind and in between the cabin and the gardens. It would sit to the side, so closer to the industrial premises, the commercial premises, sorry, that Carpet World, I think it is, to the right-hand side as you look at that plan. And so the acoustic fence would go all the way behind that container, because that's been recognised that in the past that has had some gathering associated with it.
So, second question is in connection with this figure of 15 dBA, which we mentioned, or perhaps 17, which the agent has mentioned. So 15 or 17 dBA, what does that sound like? Because I have no idea. What machinery, what equivalent would that be, that I would understand?
Well, things like talking in loud voices are probably about 3 dBA, so it's multiply that by 5.
Have you got an example of what that might sound like?
I'm sorry, I don't personally have an example, no. But it's a very substantial. Bearing in mind the noise report suggests that the operations of the site would only add about 2 decibels to background noise levels. You're reducing it by 15. So that's a very significant change.
Thank you.
But you next, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Would some other kind of construction, like a stone wall or a brick wall, be even more effective than an acoustic fence? I have another question.
Sorry, Chair. I don't actually know the answer to that question, but bearing in mind that the timber fence leads to that 15 dB reduction, then I don't think there's any requirement to consider another form of boundary treatment.
Thank you. If I can ask a different question about the toilet. It's a portable loo. It's only been on site recently. The office is an actual building. I just wonder why this showroom doesn't have a permanent toilet on site. In fact, toilets that are suitable both for men, women, and people who are disabled. There is only that portable loo. And all the paper for drying your hands and for the other service are placed in the sink in that portable loo. I just wonder why the applicant hasn't sought permission to upgrade that facility, given that you've got families coming on site, people looking at maybe several cars across the course of a morning or afternoon. It does seem to me that the facilities are an absolute minimum here. Thank you.
Chair, I think, to be honest, that is dealt with under different legislation and not the planning legislation, so I don't think we can consider that. You know, I agree in principle that it's certainly not ideal, but in terms of the health and safety regulations that govern what is required to be put on a workplace, I can't comment on that in relation to this specific planning application.
Thanks, Lucy. Next I've got Barbara.
Thank you, Chair. Can we move the slides back to the bund? And it's the one looking down at the bungalow. Keep going. That's it. Right. Now, I've noticed in amended condition 2, you're going to suggest putting a gate in to provide access. That is actually a very narrow strip between the bund and the backs of the properties. And I mean, walking along it to the end, the land falls away quite markedly. And in that top corner, where the infestation of weed is, you've already got sort of a lot of sort of bramble and other stuff growing. And because the slope makes it incredibly difficult to manage. Now, why can't the acoustic fence be put further into the grounds, leaving a decent space for the landscaping to be maintained? And if that is the final landscaping, I think I'd sort of check the definition of landscaping, because yes, some plants have been put in, but it's the suitability of the plants, but it's the maintenance. The strip isn't wide enough. Can it be widened? Can the fence be put further into the compound?
Chair, obviously we're dealing with the proposals that are in front of us at the moment. It's likely that a gate would have to go in on the fence kinks slightly as it goes round and round the back of the cabin area, so it would be that element that kinks sidewards. There isn't a proposal to move the fence further into the site, so I think members need to consider it as it is today. The distance between where the fence would be and where the existing boundaries are is approximately 3 metres. That image was taken in the winter time. Obviously, members that went on the site visit will have seen the landscaping that's in subsequently. That was approved under a landscaping condition with the assistance of our landscape colleagues at the council. But, you know, that's what's been approved for that particular strip of land.
Can I just check, are we allowed to make a recommendation, or is it purely on where the current proposal line is?
Chair, I think if you were proposing, if committee were proposing that fence was to be moved, I think you would have to defer the application, because that isn't what is in front of you at the moment, and obviously it reduces the space available for the applicant on the site. So that, to my mind, I can get legal advice on that if you'd like, but to my mind that would be a deferral request.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd agree with the planning officer there that if members want to change something other than conditions and wanted the planning officers to go back to the applicant to discuss something else, that would be a deferral and then invite the planning officer back to report back. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. Are you proposing that, Barbara?
I honestly don't know. I mean, to me, it's a huge issue because that actually sort of, if you like, lessens the slope of the side, because it was quite difficult walking along the top, and it was easy to slither down. So I am concerned about the maintenance of any vegetation in there, whatever it is. You know, whether it's sort of, you know, we approve the landscaping that's in there or not. And to me, that'd be one sensible way round the issue, just having room for machinery to get in there and do the proper maintenance for the residents. Because I've never been faced with that decision, I think I'd actually have to sort of look around the room and think whether that's a reasonable thing to ask for. But, and also, is it a case that sort of we either sort of accept or refuse this, approve or refuse this application, and then I can bring it in, or is it a case that I have to bring it in now? I'm unfamiliar with the process.
Thank you. Obviously, if there was a proposal to defer to get something considered again by the applicant with the planning officers, that would then go to a vote, so it would be for the members to decide. But in terms of actually the reasons for a deferral, I think it's reasonable to consider what we normally discuss in terms of conditions. And one of the things we talk about with conditions is whether it's necessary. So here, in respect of going back and asking the planning officer to go back to the applicant and discuss something like moving a fence, here I think what members would need to be considering is there something here that where they would consider refusing the application and something that could reasonably be done that would mitigate that reason. So here I think what members need to address is what problem would moving the fence be solving, and therefore in their mind it would be necessary to go back to the applicant and to try and resolve that issue. If you haven't actually got a reason for refusal that would be improved by moving of the fence, then that would suggest that it isn't really a necessary deferral. But I think the planning officer might want to come back and add anything further to that. Thank you.
Can we Peter in, please?
Can I come in? Because you stole my thunder, really. Because on the visit yesterday, some of us went to the bedroom of the resident. It was quite clear that in the bed you can actually see the steering wheel of the car that's parked above. Now, I don't care whether it's daylight or evening. If somebody sat up there and you can see direct into a bedroom window, that won't be accepted in any other planning application for a building. It's overlooking straight into a bedroom window. And I just think if the whole fence was moved back, so the handle had gone, so you couldn't see into it, it would make this much more acceptable. I can't accept it currently is, having seen that situation that those residents are in. But if we can, I don't know, defer it to see if the actual applicant would move it back a couple of metres, so it might take a car out. That angle looking into people's bedrooms gone. I don't know whether the officers actually went into one of the bedrooms to see the implications, but I was quite horrified when I stood there and I could see people sat in the car looking into the window. Now that's a planning reason for not accepting the application, Chair. So I'm happy to move that if that's what people think.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I think it would be a good idea for the planning officer to come in and discuss again the bedroom window aspect. Thank you.
Chair, I think the issue with, obviously the acoustic fence would result in no overlooking to gardens or ground floor windows. I think it's always more difficult with bedroom windows because in any scenario, bedroom windows are always going to overlook any boundary fences. It's the same with house to house, it's the same with house to business. So I don't personally think that's a strong enough reason to require what you're suggesting, but obviously it's for members to determine that. But you just have to think about the scenario with, you know, as I say, any bedroom window across the city and what you can look out onto and look across.
Can I just come back to Peter? Are you proposing, Peter, that we move this fence back?
I mean, I'd like to hear what other members think, but I thought, I mean, one or two of us discussed at the time that we thought just shifting the cars back to a couple of metres would solve it. The views you'll be, I mean, the noise is a different kettle of fish, but the further away you can get those, the more, well, more acceptable would be, I guess, to the residents, but it's certainly a difficult one, and I just thought that, and one or two of us thought the same, that by shifting them back a bit, it would stop that visual interference in people's lives. So I'm happy to move it if necessary.
Can I just come back a minute? I mean, sort of, I was in the bedroom, but I actually looked from the car park back again because I thought it was unfair to just take one side. And it was even standing sort of some distance back. We looked straight into the bedroom, so I can ignore what Peter said. You know, sort of from the other aspect, I was quite surprised that how clearly we could see into the bedrooms from the car park area, and that was sort of the wrong side, if you like, the car park side of the bund. So this is why, I mean, I can accept the fact that, yeah, I mean, I think Peter and I both agreed that sort of a lot of the problems would be solved or could be addressed, I can't say solved, if the acoustic fence could be put back. So is it a case that between the two of us, one of us can propose and second and put it to the committee and see whether people vote for a deferral or not?
Can we do that, Vicky?
Certainly you can propose and second a deferral and vote on it. It would seem here that the issue that you're trying to address potentially with this deferral is a overlooking amenity issue. I think your planning officer has already given some advice on that. I don't know whether she just wants to come back and clarify that. But if you are considering an issue here with an overlooking amenity issue to the neighbouring properties, then going through with this process is an option. Obviously, you can continue with the questions and comments and go through to refuse on those grounds as an alternative if that's what members wish to do. It is for members really to take this forward and decide the way they want to go with it. Thank you.
Can I just add that one of my points was also to ensure that sort of that strip could be maintained satisfactorily. You know, so whether that's a planning concern, I'm not too sure. It wasn't just the overlooking, it was both aspects of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be prepared to second Peter's proposal. But what I was going to ask originally is, decibels are funny things, aren't they? If you increase something by 1 decibel, it don't mean it's a bit more than the previous figure. It's an exponential calculation. So if it's going to reduce by, how much did we say it was going to reduce the noise by?
15 dB, and if you think about 2 to 3 is you know, virtually inaudible. So, but 15 is obviously 5 times that.
Well, I'll take the report's word for that, but it sounds an awful big reduction, 15 decibels. But I think the problem is that the car sale or car whatever it is above the houses, and I'll support Peter's proposal because we can do anything to take that problem away. So I'll leave it with the meeting now, but I do find that decibel figure a bit puzzling.
Thank you.
We're not going to be able to move the acoustic fence further back into the site because that affects its performance. So I think you're either going to have to approve this or refuse it because we're not going to move the fence.
Well, we'll continue discussing it and then make a decision at the end. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, just a question on, because one of the things I'm quite concerned with, like the resident mentioned, in terms of the impact on peace and enjoyment, the noise concern. So 2 hours on a noisy day is just trying to understand how the survey was done. Was it just that on a busy day, or because anything like that, which obviously once this is put in place or gone ahead, it's going to have residents would have to live with it, and the huge impact I'm just looking at on their health and well-being and mental state, because I have come across many people with the noise issue. It has actually impacted hugely on their mental health. So it's just something, I know I was quite pleased that it's been addressed with this acoustic fence, how effective that is, and I know it's already been mentioned. I just want to stress the level of impact on people's health and mental state before even going ahead with this and making sure that that is properly addressed. Just a question.
Thank you. Lucy?
Chair, any acoustic survey is done under the recommendations of the Environmental Protection Service. It's a very reputable firm that's carried out the survey, and the survey was to test the background noise levels rather than the so the specific survey that they undertook with noise monitors was to check the background noise levels rather than the noise from the operations on this site. The operations on the site ceased whilst they did the noise survey, so they could check what the ambient noise levels were in the area. So our environmental protection colleagues are more than happy with the survey, and as I say, certainly done by a professional outfit.
Thank you, Lucy. Clifford?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, if we grant this is going to be permanent, and you know there's been a history of problems with this with this car business, and what recourse is there then? I mean, do we have to deal with these issues on a one-by-one basis of noise and what have you? I mean, is there any way of future taking away planning permission for this?
Chair, yes, they are seeking permanent planning permission, and it would be subject to the conditions that are listed, which includes the permanent retention and maintenance of the acoustic fence. Obviously, if there are any particular incidences where the conditions are not complied with, or indeed where there are noise events that trigger the intervention of the Environmental Protection Service, then there are ways of handling those under different legislation, but it is granting permanent consent subject to the conditions outlined.
Thank you. Can I just make one other comment, please, Chair? Yeah, so on acoustics, as an electronic engineer, I sort of deal with decibels on a well, I have dealt with decibels on a day-by-day basis, and what 1 decibel is difference between 2 levels is just about discernible. 15 dB is going to be a fairly moderate difference in levels, so it is a worthwhile thing having that fence there to cut the noise levels by 15 dB. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff. What are you, Sophie, next?
Thank you. So I was going to ask if the officers accept that the fence will reduce overall noise, which it seems like you do. I think it feels like some people in the room, including me, are doubtful of this, especially as it was mentioned that brick and mortar walls from the house aren't currently helping the noise levels for the residents. There's been complaints that they can't watch their own TV and talk to each other in the house when works are being carried out on the site. So you said that the fence will reduce decibel levels by 15 dB. I'm the same, I don't pretend really to understand how much that actually is. There was no reference in the surveys, I don't think, to alarms and engines, which seemed to be a big problem for the residents. And I assume that the alarms weren't blaring out when the noise survey was carried out. But if this really is going to reduce the noise levels, what course of action can we as a committee take, or what course of action can the residents take if that isn't the case, if that claim turns out not to be true? So that's my first question. And the other question was, I'm still a bit confused about the reference in the objections to ignoring warnings from planning officers. I just want to know what the verdict is here exactly, and what the view on the fact that there's a very similar business very nearby with no complaints happening. Thank you.
Chair, in terms of the noise survey, there is reference within the full noise survey to engines running. Alarms are sporadic events, so they are not things that are covered by the general noise survey, but engines definitely are covered in terms of the impact and the, what that would result in terms of decibel impact on residents. But yeah, alarms are sporadic events that are not covered. So the full noise survey is available on the planning application file, so you would be able to see what aspects that covers. So it covers people's voices and it covers cars moving and so on, and car doors slamming, that type of thing. In terms of what course of action, the specified fence, I mean, these reports and the acoustic fence is done on modelling, and they are tested again and again. So that should result in 15 decibel reduction. But what you need to bear in mind as well is that the Environmental Protection Service say that an acoustic fence isn't actually necessary on this site. So this is something that the applicant is offering, which is a substantial benefit and would also not just cut the noise from this specific site, but would cut the background noise coming from the road as well. So I think you need to bear that in mind when considering the application.
Thanks, Lucy. I've got you now, Roger.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, like many, 15 decibels means very, very little. What is the decibel level of an engine starting up? Pardon? Sorry.
Chair, I don't have that specific information, but the acoustic report covers all those eventualities. So what they look at is a series of different, when they've done tests on different things like car engines, like car doors slamming. So that is all covered in the acoustic report. I'd have to go through it in detail, but it has been assessed and it is addressed in that report. And it's been checked by Environmental Protection Service officers who are obviously our experts who are input into the planning application process.
Will it be monitored? Will the decibel level be monitored in the next 6 months or so?
That isn't something that's built into the application. As I said before, Environmental Protection Service colleagues concluded that an acoustic fence wasn't actually necessary in this case, and it's something that's being offered at a substantial benefit.
And finally, what happened to the floodlights? Because there was obviously a complaint about the floodlights, and there doesn't seem to be one now.
Chair, there's not been any recent complaints about floodlights, and we've also included a condition to control that as well.
What are you, Gary? Gary?
Sorry, Chair. No, I went to sleep. I didn't catch it all, Peter. Very difficult because it would have been nice for the DBEs I thank Cliff for what he's just said, actually, to clarify it a little bit more. But Roger made a good point, how many, all those cars, there must have been 20 in that particular row, if they all started up, 2 or 3 of them started up, how much, decibels would that sound? And we don't know. And yes, you're right, the applicant doesn't have to put this fence up here. But it's just a bit of a nuisance. It's like Councillor Peter Price said, when we were in that bedroom, you're looking straight up and you could hear people, with windows shut, you could still hear the people on that side talking. And then when you sat in conservatory or on that back garden, it is a nuisance. So it's a difficult one, Chair, and I've listened very carefully to what everybody said, and I'll sum up at the end. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. I've got you again, Brian.
Right. Thank you, Chair. I think it's the buffer. This is a question, I suppose. It's the width of the buffer zone that's in my mind on this, because as Councillor Moss has already said, it's the drop on the slope which is really quite significant. And if you're trying to get in there and maintain this area, you can't do it at that 3 metre width. We were struggling to walk along there. So I think it does need to be brought back. It will make vegetation more visible for the people in their kitchens, adjoining the gardens, in the gardens and from the bedroom windows. It'll allow better maintenance, and it'll push the fence further back as well, so that won't be as intrusive as well. So that's what I would put forward, and I'd support anyone that wanted to put forward anything on that, whether that means deferral or not.
Thanks, Brian. Bob.
Sorry, Chair, but I have looked at the search engine just for clarity. Common sources of sounds, a whisper is about 30 decibels, in normal conversations about 60, motorcycle engine running is about 95. Noise above 70 decibels over a prolonged period of time may start damaging your hearing. So what we were hearing in the gardens yesterday was normal conversation, 60 decibels, when we were sort of on Parsley Hay. From this, now I can see shakings of head there, but this is, if you like, a guide. I'm not saying it's 100% accurate. And that, I mean, 15 decibels reduction on that would not quite reduce it to a whisper, but that gives some indication of the sort of drop you'd get in volume. And I can see Lucy wants to do that. I was hoping for clarity, but obviously I've raised a lot of other issues instead. I apologise.
Chair, you can't rely on a Google search for your consideration of this application.
I've got Mike next, and I'm going to bring this to a close.
Thank you, Chair. Brian has just put the concerns and questions that I had. That bank is very narrow, and to try and maintain any hedging or landscaping of vegetation in that narrow strip on that steep hump would be positively dangerous for any gardener or groundsman. I really cannot see how, even with once you put the gate into the fence, I cannot see how that area can then be maintained.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to ask Vicky, I'm going to make a suggestion and ask her if it appears to me that we want to move the fence back, but it also appears from the applicant that they can't move it back. So it looks as though all we can do is either vote for or against. Am I right, Vicky?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the applicant agent has come forward and given a view on what would happen if you did defer, and she's indicated that it would likely just come straight back to committee in the same form as it is now. On that basis, members may take the view that the deferral is not worth pursuing, and to go and proceed and vote on this application as it stands. I think if you do decide to go and vote on the application as it stands, obviously you need to go through a comment process, but I think it would be useful for the planning officer just to come back on the sort of the overlooking issue. And there's been a lot of concerns about the maintenance of the strip. I'm not familiar with the condition, presumably, that refers to maintenance, but I would advise members that the difficulties associated with maintaining that strip is a problem for the applicant to address, not something for the planning committee to really concern itself with. Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. Right, I'll open up for comments then, if anybody's got any. Gary?
Right then, Chair. If we can't move the fencing back, can we... sorry, it's a question, not a comment, but I do apologise. It's just come to my head. Well, I did write it down earlier, but anyway, what I'm saying is I wonder if we can, on site, if the fencing is not going to be moved, because applicants are saying that, that's fine and dandy, but can we put a condition on to say that, and I hope somebody backs me up on this, that, you know, no cars can come with a metre to that fence on that side of...
Lucy?
Chair, I don't know how you would enforce that without there being some sort of other physical barrier, a metre within the site, which isn't something that's shown on those plans. So I think that again, we would have to go back to the applicant to discuss.
Thank you, Lucy. Anyone else? Peter?
Yeah, sorry about it, Chair, but I'm going to oppose this. I agree with what the Member of Parliament said when he said there is a need to put distance between the boundary and the acoustic fence and where the vehicles are parked and customers and staff meet at the side, up by the side. He's talking about the concern about the ability of both employees and customers to look into people's gardens and certainly straight into the first floor windows. And then goes about acoustic fence. So I think that I'm not prepared to support this application as it is at the moment, Chair. If the applicant's not prepared to move that fence back, then I'm going to vote against it, Chair.
Yep. I think we're left with a vote. Right, so we'll go round, starting with you, Mike.
Against the application, Chair.
Brian?
Yeah, I will also vote against the application, Chair.
Yep.
Again, unfortunately, against the application.
Tony? Peter?
Against, Chair.
Tony?
Against, Chair.
Gary?
Yeah, against, Chair.
For, Chair.
Sophie?
Against.
Barbara?
Against, Chair.
Clifford?
Against, Chair.
That's against.
Thank you. Now the vote on the officer's recommendation has been lost. Therefore, the next part of the process is for a member of the committee to move refusal of the application and to advise what their planning reasons are for the refusal. And then after a member has done that, I would suggest that the planning officer comes forward with some comments on those reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Peter?
Sorry, my reason will be overlooking the people's bedrooms. I think that's we've turned planning applications down in the past when people have been able to see into people's bedrooms, and I think that's a genuine planning reason for refusing this application, Chair.
Barbara?
Yeah, I mean, it's just against the amenities value for the residents. It's not just looking into the bedrooms, it's actually sort of the overbearing nature of the structure once that landscaping is in place, if it can't be maintained. So, yeah, I'd be against it for, I think that's the grounded amenity value.
Thank you. Lucy?
So, Chair, it does look like it's so people are not mentioning noise, presumably because of the technical evidence that we have presented. It's really in relation to overlooking. In terms of overbearing, I think you need to get a view from more members in terms of that, because we did describe that because of where the acoustic fence is set into the site, beyond the bund there, and because of the presence of existing fences, I'm not personally convinced that you would really see that over the eye line. So I think you need to decide which members agree with the overbearing impact.
Right. So, again, we're going with...
Could I add in something here, which is about this buffer zone, which is of an unreasonable, in our opinion, width. So that is a key issue, and it's about taking this back on that basis, at least in part.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the width, what I think members need to address there is what problem would increasing the width solve? I think the planning officer just mentioned there that so far members aren't concerned with the noise. So what increasing the width of the buffer, what actual planning issue would that resolve would be useful for members to articulate. Thank you.
Barbara?
Yeah, I mean, overbearing, sort of, it's the vegetation. If you can't maintain it, is it fair to allow planning where we're in a situation where the owner of the site can't maintain the vegetation? I mean, when we were there yesterday, you could see how the trees were sort of growing up and shadowing everything, and they're not being maintained at a certain height. So I think it's unreasonable to expect the applicant to maintain something that's really not maintainable without a lot of stress. And that's why I think it's overbearing. It would be the subsequent sort of couple of years, not just the fencing.
Chair, the other look, because the houses are below, the bedrooms are below, it's at an angle. So if you get the vehicles further back, the angle changes, so you're looking above the bedrooms. That's when I estimated when I was on site, I thought, well, if they could just go back, they wouldn't be able to see it to be above the lintel of the windows, that angle. Anyway, that's my view. I think it's wrong to let them stay where they are and look into people's bedrooms. And I don't think that fence would reach high enough to stop it. I mean, look, the fence that's currently there.
Mike?
Thanks, Chair. It's also about the elevation of that bank. That is a very steep bank, and if you've only got a few metres to work with, you're setting up whoever maintains it to have an accident. I can't understand how we can give planning permission for a fence but not have any idea about how the land between the fence and the neighbouring gardens can be maintained to keep the vegetation to a reasonable height. How that can't be a planning how that cannot be a planning consideration is beyond me. It's as though we're looking at everything being on the level when it's clearly not. The whole reason this is a problem is because of the difference in height between the residential area and the much higher up commercial area.
Lucy, do you want to come in on that?
Chair, so I think the sense I'm getting is that that members are not happy with the separation distance and the lack of a sufficient buffer to resolve the privacy issues, I think is what you're driving at, isn't it? So the buffer between the garden boundaries and the acoustic fence is not sufficient to maintain adequate levels of privacy, is what I'm picking up. Vicky, is that what you're picking up?
Thanks, Lucy. Victoria?
I'd agree with the way that Lucy has summarised the potential reasons for a refusal there. If members are happy with that, I would recommend that they delegate the final wording of refusal between the planning officers and yourself, Alan. And also what we would need now is, I believe it was Councillor Price who started this discussion off with proposing some reasons, and now we'd need a seconder for those reasons as well, and then we'd move on to vote on the refusal on that basis. Thank you.
I'll put my microphone on. Usually people are asking me to turn it off, but I thought I seconded it, and I apologise if I've misunderstood what happened. I am prepared to second it.
Are you prepared to propose, Peter? Yes. Yeah. So I have a proposal, and we have a second. So we go to a vote. So we start with you, Mike. You're voting for the proposal to move the fence.
Yep, I'm voting for the new proposal, Chair.
Yes, I'm also voting for the new proposal, Chair.
Nigar?
Yeah, for the new proposal.
For the new proposals, Chair.
For, Chair.
Tony?
For, Chair. New proposal.
Gary?
Yes, for it, Chair.
Bob?
Abstain, Chair.
Roger?
For, Chair.
For.
Barbara?
For, Chair.
Clifford?
For, Chair.
that proposal accepted. Thank you. Right, we move along now to item 7B, which is application number 22/00723/FUL. Land at junction with Cobden Road and Northfield Road, which is page 41 of the agenda, and this one is Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just move the screen along to the site plan, please? Thank you. So this is an application for the redevelopment of the site for 3 ground floor retail units and 13 residential apartments, a mixture of studios, 1-bed and 2-bed apartments. The site is located in Crooks. Northfield Road is located to the west of the site, and Cobden View Road is located to the north and east. There have previously been 2 applications for development of the site. The first was in 2020, and that was for 3 commercial units and 18 apartments, and that was withdrawn. And then in 2021, there was another application for 3 commercial units and 14 apartments, and again that was withdrawn. The issues raised in relation to those applications were largely in relation to design, scale and massing, and also amenity issues, and the current application is overcome those previous concerns. So the application site is located in the District Shopping Centre. On Northfield Road, which runs to the west of the site, is characterised by a mixture of commercial units, predominantly retail and food and drink outlets. Further to the north on Northfield Road, the area changes and it becomes more residential. Cobden View Road is predominantly residential in nature, and you can see from that aerial photograph that the sort of grain of the area is terraced properties located at the back edge of the pavement. So these are some photographs of the site. So these 3 are taken from Cobden View Road. The larger picture on the left-hand side shows sort of the corner of the site. The top right-hand picture is a view looking up Cobden View Road with Northfield Road in the background. And the bottom right-hand picture is looking sort of directly at the site. You can see from the images that the site is fenced off, so it is not available for public use, and the path that crosses the site is no longer in use because the site has been fenced off. These images are taken along Northfield Road to the west of the site, so the top left-hand picture is looking north along Northfield Road with the application site just in the distance on the right-hand side. The bottom picture shows the view looking south. Again, the application site is visible. And the top right-hand picture shows a view more sort of head-on of the site. So you can see again, the site is fenced off, and you can also get a feel for the topography of the area. The site slopes down along Northfield Road, and also down along Cobden View Road. So this is the site layout plan. You can see that the development is a back edge of pavement development. It sort of wraps around both site frontages. It doesn't include any parking, and it does include amenity space to the rear of the site for use by the residents. You can see from this image the relationship with existing properties, the closest of which is to the south, which is 189 Cobden View Road. There's also residential properties directly opposite on Cobden View Road, and opposite the site Northfield Road, there are a couple of residential properties there as well, interspersed amongst the commercial units. So this site plan shows the elevations. As you can see, on Northfield Road, there's the 3 commercial units at ground floor level with the residential properties above. The development steps down the site to take account of the topography of the street. And again, on Cobden View Road, it steps down from the corner towards the houses on Cobden View Road. I'm not sure if you can quite make it out in there, but there is an outline of the previous scheme that was withdrawn. It shows the height of the previous schemes, but it's not overly clear on that image. So these are sections through the site. The top image is looking through the development on Northfield Road, and it's showing how the land drops, and it's looking sort of a section through to 189 Cobden View Road. So you can see the level differences and the separation distances. And the bottom image is similar, but sort of taken further up the site. Then the top picture here shows the rear elevation of the development and also a section through the apartments which will be facing onto Cobden View Road. And the bottom images show the rear, some more of the rear elevation of the proposal. So that is the end of the presentation. There is a short supplementary report which contains just a correction to the report, 2 additional conditions, one relating to the control of hours for the movement of sorting and removal of waste materials from the commercial units, and the other condition controls the hours of the retail units to between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. There's also been 2 additional neighbour representations. The points raised in them refer to the fact that there were 2 previously withdrawn schemes, and it's not clear what has changed between those withdrawn schemes and the current application. There's also reference to the fact that the development has no parking, and it appears to be sort of being justified by the provision of cycle parking, but a recent survey by Sheffield in 2020 indicated that only 1% of journeys are made by bicycle. The objections also refer to the lack of a 5-year housing land supply in question, that shouldn't outweigh all other considerations. And there's also concern that the members of the public were not made aware that the application was going to committee, and have been able to register to voice objections at committee.
Thank you, Sarah. We have 2 speakers on this. The first speaker is Ruth. She'd like to take the thing, please. Yeah, 5 minutes, please, Ruth.
Thank you very much, Chair. Is this okay, volume? Hello, everybody. I'm here on behalf of myself and to represent my constituents in Crooks, who are overwhelmingly against this development. I want to highlight a premise of the National Planning Policy Framework as revised last year, which states that development that is not well designed should be refused, and this is the basis for what I want to say to you. The framework's presumption in favour of sustainable development guides Sheffield's forthcoming local plan in seeking to improve the environment and mitigate climate change, and warns against granting applications simply to meet objectively assessed needs for housing. Where local policies are out of date, the guidance is clear that permission should not be granted where any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The message to planning authorities is they should have the courage of their convictions to stand up against poor and mediocre residential design and reject development where it would have an overwhelmingly negative effect on people and the environment. But since the latest MPPF revision, there's been a marked shift in local authorities successfully defending design-based appeals, with inspectors using aesthetic and livability arguments to override the 5-year tilted balance. In light of this, I'm appealing to this committee to follow the example of other authorities by considering the real weight of arguments against this application, which is clear in the reports pack that you've had, which very much outweigh the outdated 5-year supply argument. And I'm asking members to reject the application without fear of reprisal at an appeal, because inspectors have been liberated to help us defend against damage to environment, ecology, air quality and citizens' well-being. If Crooks, which is already an area of very high density housing, really does require more accommodation to be stuffed onto every available street corner, there's an overwhelming argument for that to be affordable family homes, not tiny apartments in an overbearing block with no parking provision in an area where on-road parking is already beyond full capacity, resulting in frequent reports of dangerous and illegal parking to the police. The officer's report draws on data that is 11 years old to try and argue that parking issues are not serious and could be solved by, quote, shuffling around. Anyone who lives on a terrace street in Crooks will tell you otherwise. The applicant's argument that residents of this development will not have cars is simply incredible. Additionally, the design lacks secure storage even for one bicycle per household, and there is no car or bicycle parking for the 3 commercial units as required by our local policies. The fact that even after 2 revisions of this design, the applicant is still failing to offer homes that meet nationally described minimum space standards should be enough to discredit the desirability of this design. The proposed building is outsized for this corner site, out of keeping with the existing heritage street scene, and compromises the mainly Victorian villa aspect on Cobden View Road. Contrary to the officer's report, building to this scale will materially alter the whole aspect of this location to an overwhelming degree. Residents are deeply unhappy with the prospect of losing the open vista across this undeveloped corner, which provides a breathing space and area of visual respite on a heavily polluted road and in an otherwise unbroken built environment. Contrary to what the applicant has claimed, the open space has been cultivated with planted hedges, flowers and a grassed area tended for many years by residents and a local church. As such, it has been a place of shared value, recreation, social interaction and well-being. Paragraphs 92 and 93 of the MPPF clearly support retention of such informal well-being amenities where they, quote, promote social interaction and enable and support healthy lifestyles.
Could you wind up, please?
For example, through the provision of safe and accessible green infrastructure. Authorities are cautioned against the unnecessary loss of these facilities. I will wind up, Chair, thank you. Just to mention that I'd like to contest the conditions set out in point 32 of the report. The hours of 7 a.m. to 11 p.m, reducing to 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Sundays, seem absolutely excessive for commercial service vehicles. And I've mentioned I should mention the concern about service vehicles parking on Northfield Road, which has a no waiting restriction opposite a junction and very near to a bus stop. The neighbour at 189 Cobden View Road, the neighbouring property, is concerned about commercial bin collections.
More than 5 minutes now, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I just draw your attention to points 6, 7, 8 and 12 as well in terms
Sorry,
of...
Ruth, you've had more than your time, thank you.
In terms of access, thank you.
We've got speaker 4 in the application, which is James Roberts. If James would like to take the thing, please. You've got 5 minutes, James, thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members. My name is James Roberts and I act on behalf of the applicant Whitemore Design and Build Limited. We've been working on this site for a significant period of time and have engaged in detailed discussions and negotiations with the Council's planning officers. I would like to place on record our gratitude to officers for their hard work to date. Officers have prepared a detailed and comprehensive report which clearly sets out that the proposal complies with relevant planning policy and guidance. However, we are aware this application has generated a significant level of public interest and would like to highlight a few key points. This application presents the opportunity to secure a mixed-use scheme in a highly sustainable area with excellent access to local services and public transport links. Future residents would benefit from a very high standard of living environment with convenient access to shops, schools, parks and other public facilities. This type of development, which does not include any dedicated car parking but is in a highly sustainable area, encourages the use of public transport and travel by means other than private cars. This should be seen as a significant benefit of the scheme rather than something which will cause parking problems in the local area. The proposal would make a valuable contribution to the delivery of new housing at a time where demand is high, supply is low, and the Council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The proposal would bring economic benefits during and post-construction and includes ground floor commercial units which are fully compatible with the development plan allocations for the site. The scheme has been carefully designed to ensure that it would sit comfortably in this location and would assimilate well with the existing built form which surrounds the site. The site is privately owned by my client and is not public open space of any kind. All statutory consultees have reviewed the application and there are no objections to the scheme in this regard. The site holds no significant ecological value and includes a landscaping scheme to ensure betterment on this front. Whilst it's acknowledged that the application has generated public objections, the officer report makes it very clear that these do not stand up to detailed scrutiny. I would therefore like to respectfully urge members to determine this application purely on its planning merits and grant permission as recommended by officers. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Sarah?
Thank you. So I'll just respond briefly to the comments made in relation to the scheme. So in terms of the design, officers consider that the scheme is well designed. It's been built to reflect the character of the local area. It's set to the back edge of the footway, as are other properties in the local area. It steps down the hill to reflect the topography, and it uses materials that are characteristic of the area, notably on the front elevations, natural stone and slate for the roof. Reference was made to the 5-year housing land supply being outdated, but that's not the case. It's still very, very relevant and is obviously something we need to take into account when determining applications for housing development such as this. Reference is made to parking, and officers acknowledge that there will be some increase in parking within the local area, but we don't consider that this is severe, and it's not a reason for refusal. Reference was made to cycle parking, that there wasn't enough cycle parking provision for each unit, and the original plans do show 12 cycle parking spaces, but we have attached a condition which requires 16 cycle parking spaces and 2 spaces each for the commercial units to address that. It's acknowledged that the site appears to have been used as cultivated green space previously, but it has now been fenced off. It is private land. There's no public access to it, and we can't require the developer to keep it for public use. In relation to commercial vehicles deliveries, we've got a condition requiring them to be between 7 and 11 p.m. That condition was recommended by EPS. The commercial element of the scheme is on Northfield Road, which is the busy road that runs through Crooks, with other commercial units on, and those hours were considered to be appropriate in the context of that area.
Thanks, Sarah. Members' questions? Tony?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the one question I would really like to get to the bottom of is how do we know that people, there's 13 flats with no dedicated car parking accommodation. How do we expect people not to be able to own a car in this day and age, and where, there's no on-street parking, there's no fuel, there's nothing being put out where they can park a car. So, I like that question answering, if I may, Chair. Thank you.
Sarah?
I'll let Helen answer that one.
Thank you, Chair. Being perfectly honest, we can't say people will definitely not own a car. That's not something that's possible to say. However, what we can say is that there are certain locations where it is less likely that people will own cars, those being sites that are highly accessible by public transport, that have access to shops and facilities, which we believe this is one of them. I would also say that the census information does indicate that about 25% of people in the Crooks area currently don't have a car. So I think that is some information that we're based on. But our view is that it is a site that one is that our guidelines are maximum guidelines. So we're actually actively promoting free and, you know, reduced level of car parking. And that we feel that in this location it is an area that is suitable for that type of development. And we do accept that, yes, there will be some additional on-street parking. However, that's not likely to be of a magnitude that will constitute a highway safety reason for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
If I can come back, Chair, can I?
Yes, still here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, public transport is not that easily accessible. It's very expensive now. And so that is one of the reasons why people tend to use a car, unfortunately. I'd like to see it different to that. I'd like to see buses, when I was driving buses some years ago, I'd like to see buses come back where there were cheaper fares, and people would then be encouraged to use public transport. But in this day and age, and as things are at the moment, I just don't see how we can expect people, just based on a census, how we can expect people to not own a motor car. It might just be a throwaway comment, but if you've got anything you can say on that, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I completely agree with you in terms of bus patronage. Unfortunately, that's not something that we have any control over. As I say, I think we're not saying that everybody who lives in those apartments or who visits the commercial units will not be driving. I think what we are saying is that it is an area where we can accommodate this type of development, and that the levels of additional car usage or additional parking demand that may arise would not be of such a magnitude as to warrant refusal of the application on highway safety grounds. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Could I just ask members of the public not to talk, please, while we're discussing? You're disturbing the meeting. Thank you. Brian?
Oh, thank you. A few questions, I'm afraid. Let's whiz through them. So the planning application makes specific reference to cycle storage, to cycle provision. What exactly are they providing for cyclists to encourage? Is there secure cycle storage? If I could have an answer to that. That would provide for peace of mind and to encourage people to cycle more. Number two, so how exactly is the local community going to benefit in this part of Crooks from a landscaping scheme when it's just completely tucked away at the back of the site? It's not visible to passers-by or to residents like the previous, what was an open site, did. Thirdly, the housing mix is completely wrong. The pressure, as other people have mentioned already, is for family accommodation in this area. Students and young professionals can continue then to live in the area that they love and enjoy. So this is the wrong type of accommodation being built. Number four, it's an important open space for the area. You can see from the first slide how dense the terraces are. If you look back at the very first slide, there's no green space around. Of course, there is over the top of the hill and just over, but not within those terraces, so it's a loss. Number five, within district centres such as this, there's a density range of 50 to 80 dwellings per hectare. This equates apparently to 238 dwellings per hectare. It's on a small site, yeah, but it's huge, that density. It's overbearing, it's overdevelopment. So those are my questions. Why has that been allowed to happen? Oh, so size space as well for the dwellings as well. They're incredibly small in some cases. So that's perhaps number six.
Okay.
Sarah?
Right, I'll try and answer all of those. So firstly, cycle provision. Yes, there is secure cycle provision for the apartments located to the rear of the site.
Is it secure?
Yes, it is secure. Yeah. In terms of landscaping, you're right, there is a condition for landscaping scheme, but the landscaping won't predominantly be visible from the public view. There is a small area to the front of some of the houses on Cobden View. If you could just bring up the layout plan, please. Thank you. So you can see there's a couple of small gardens that front onto Cobden View Road. So there's a small bit, but predominantly, yeah, it won't be visible. In terms of a housing mix, we've assessed the application as it has been submitted for studios, 1 and 2 bed apartments. We don't have any policies that require anything other than that for a development of this scale. In terms of open space, you refer to it being part of the character of the area, but arguably the character of the area is built development up to the back edge of the pavement. This is an anomaly in the area. That open space is at present now completely obscured by fencing and hoardings around the site. And there is, as you mentioned, the Bowl Hills is in close proximity. I think it's 150 metres walking distance from the site. In terms of density, again, the density is, I think you referred to 258 dwellings per hectare, and the relevant policy states in an area like this it should be between 50 and 80 dwellings per hectare, so it is above that, but exceptions can be made for schemes to be outside those ranges where they reflect the character of the area or are well designed. And the MPPF at paragraph 124 states that we should be making efficient use of land, and that the MPPF doesn't set any density ranges, it doesn't set any limits, and this is considered to be an efficient use of land in a highly sustainable location. In relation to space standards, I think the 7 of the units meet the space standards and 6 of them don't quite meet the space standards, but they're not hugely out from the space standards. Having looked at the layout of the apartments, they are not overly small. All the rooms have natural light and outlook, so they've all got windows. And as you will be aware, we haven't adopted the nationally described space standards in Sheffield, so they carry limited weight anyway. So I hope that answers your questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you. One final thing which I missed out was about the bins. I'm worried about people taking the bins out because there's a huge distance. Sorry, if you look on here to move your bins, it seems that you push the all the way down that channel down there onto Northfield Road, I think it's Cobden View Road, as far as I can see. They're going to get left there because that's what happens. That's what happens throughout the area. If you've got a difficult access back to your house, they're going to get left there. So I don't want to see the bins left there. So that has to be rethought, I think.
So there's 2 bin stores for the site. There's one for the commercial units, which is sort of right at it's on Cobden View Road and located next to the existing building. So that's for the commercial premises. And then, the one for the residents is located to the rear of the site in the area that you've highlighted. The bin store shows sort of large-scale bins, not individual wheelie bins. So in instances like this where it's residential development, there will be some kind of management strategy. There'll be a management company that will sort of take charge of the management of the flats, and there'll be some sort of strategy to arrange for those bins to be collected or taken out, or potentially some kind of company will come and collect those bins and bring them back.
Can I ask, is that within the conditions or any other means?
It's not within the conditions, but we could put a condition on requiring details of the servicing strategy if members felt that was appropriate.
Yes, I think we need a bit more detail because there's some detail missing off this the whole scheme, and that's one aspect. So yes, I would ask for that as a condition.
I'll second that, Chair.
If you've got a proposal for a new condition and it's been seconded, you need to ask members to vote to add that condition to the recommendation. Thank you.
Yep. Right, could we have just a show of hands, please, for that proposal? That's carried. Thank you. Next question is Barbara, followed by Roger.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, sort of, Brian's already touched on most of what I was going to say about the density, but this is a follow-on from that. It's a very creative use of the site. A lot's been packed into a hugely small space. And I was looking at sort of the comments about the commercial units because it's quite open what they can be used for. Now, the one thing that struck me was that at the moment, there's no provision for sort of outside venting, sort of, you know, if you've got plant inside, or freezers, whatever, then you've then got to apply for separate planning consents to have all those mounted. In such a tight space as this, is there actually room to mount things on the outside? Because I know we can't consider it, but I think it's all part and parcel of the fact that it's a very, very densely occupied site. And I think that would limit the commercial potential for some of those units that you've got on there. You know, because it looks to me as if the only thing that you can have there is a shell and anything that can be contained within the shell. Now, how does that affect the viability of the proposal? I'm not so sure you can answer that. It's just a concern of mine. So whatever you can address, I'd appreciate it.
Thanks, Barbara. Sarah?
Okay, thank you for that. So, yeah, I suppose there are a range of, as you mentioned, there are a range of, they're shown to be retail units, but they fall within Class E, and there's a variety of uses that can fall within Class E, including, sort of, it's like commercial, service, business, so they could be offices, they could be retail, they could be, you know, small cafes. So there are a range of possible uses, and I suppose it's partly for the occupier to decide what they need, and if they do need any plant or equipment. There is space at the rear, and we would have to really consider any proposals that came up on a case-by-case basis as to, you know, what they proposed and what the impacts were of that in terms of noise and any impact on neighbours.
Any more questions, Clifford? Roger, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any provision for people with physical disabilities and certainly parking of disability vehicles? Thank you.
So the commercial units have all got level access, so they would be suitable for disabled access, but there isn't any provision for disabled parking within the site.
And the second one, which is curious, the second one is to do with parking for the commercial units that will be there. Will there be, I mean, at Crooks they've got pull-ins where cars can pull in for a short time and then move on. Will that facility be, you know, so you've got limited waiting, will that facility be there for this development?
I think that's a question for you, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. No, there won't be any parking available for this, and vehicles that require parking will be reliant on the existing on-street parking laid out as it is. There are various waiting restrictions, and there is actually a condition to provide further waiting restrictions on Northfield Road. That's in accordance with ensuring that the servicing can be carried out safely.
Do you have any more questions? Gary?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's about the Times, page 49, sorry, number 32. I mean, that's a little bit excessive, I think, for bank holidays and Sundays, 11 o'clock for comings and goings, because I suppose that could be for commercial waste as well. So I just wondered if we can reduce that, Chair, 10 o'clock.
Again, that's something, are you putting that as a proposal to alter hours? And if you are, can you give us an idea of what you want to do, Gary?
Well, I'll put it as a proposal, Chair, yeah. I mean, if we can bring that down to on Sunday, Monday to Saturday, you know, you're going to expect that from commercial stuff. But Sundays and bank holidays, Chair, I'll propose we can do up to 900 to to 11. To 10. It's 11 now, so I reduce it to 10, not to 11. Yeah, you got me, haven't you?
Vicky?
Thank you, Chair. You've got a proposal there to amend the condition. So again, if you get a seconder to that proposal and then again vote on a show of hands whether to amend that condition and add that to the recommendation as well. Thank you.
Peter?
Just a quickie, do we know what the conditions are for the retail that's across the road? Because there's quite a bit of retail there. Do they have a similar condition? That's all.
I'm afraid I don't know.
Do we have a seconder for Gary's proposal of reducing the hours Sundays and bank holidays? Brian? Can we have a show of hands on that proposal to reduce the hours, please? Against? 2 abstentions. 1, 2. All right. Is there anyone that didn't vote?
Chair, I can't vote on this one. I've ruled myself out.
That proposal was passed, thank you. Any more questions? Members' comments? Peter?
I'll make a comment, yeah. I mean, someone's got... Look, it's a difficult one because it's very tight and but it is an eyesore at the moment and I can't think any real planning grounds to refusing it, to be honest with you. In terms of vehicles, all the other properties in the area have no parking either. They're all on of similar properties and I think it'll make it could tidy the corner up. It's a private bit of land, so I can't see anything else going on it, so I'm going to support the recommendation, Chair. I understand the people's fears about it, but I just think that there isn't a genuine planning reason for us rejecting it, so I'm going to support it, Chair.
Anyone else? No. We'll move to the vote then. Mike can't vote, so start with you, Brian.
I'll be voting against this application.
Okay.
Voting against.
Terry? Peter?
For. Yeah, I'll vote for it, reluctantly.
Gary?
For, Chair.
Bob?
For, Chair.
Roger?
For, Chair, reluctantly.
Sophie? Barbara?
Abstain.
And Cliff?
For, Chair.
Right, that's passed. Thank you.
Okay. Before we move on to the next one, can we have a comfort break?
Yeah, that's fine by me. 5 minutes. Everybody? Yep.
I'm going to pee.
14 stroke FUL 715 717 Aberdale Road, Sheffield. Page 77 of the agenda. So over to you, please, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. So if you wouldn't mind moving the slides on, please, Alan. So this is the site location on Aberdale Road, number 715 717. The site falls within the local shopping centre, and the proposal is to demolish the existing building and build a two-storey building with also accommodation in the roof space. So it'll be Class E retail use on the ground floor, with a 10-bedroom house in multiple occupation above. So if you could just move the slides on a little, please. Yeah, so this is the existing building in the centre there, the sort of the squat building with the for sale signs on it. That's the building to be demolished. The next few show the building in its context. So you can see the generally two-storey nature of the street scene and the presence of dormer windows close by. This, if we just pause on that one, please, because you'll see here that there's quite a substantial forecourt in front of this building. The line identifying where the highway starts, the footway, is actually off the picture to the left. So all of that is forecourt. The next image shows an access down the side of the building, which would be retained, serves some other properties, but also would be the position where people would bring the bins in and out from the living accommodation. And the next slide just shows a further photograph of that. This slide's quite helpful in that it shows the relationship between the properties on the left, the two-storey terrace properties that front onto Coniston Road, and the building with ivy all over it is the extent of existing building as it stands at present. So it's a reasonable sized single story with a pitch roof that runs all the way back into the site. In fact, if we wouldn't mind just quickly going back to the aerial photograph, you can see there that the building's roof runs all the way back to the rear of the site. So then just quickly catching back up, Alan, to where we were before. Then the next image along shows a slightly wider angle of that relationship. You can see there that there are first floor windows in particular in the rear of those properties, and one or two off-shot extensions as well. You can just about make out. This is simply a ground floor layout which shows the extent of the retail use. You can also see there cycle parking and bin storage, and the main entrance being to the left-hand side, with some indication of external display of goods on the front there. The next slide is the upper floor, the first floor, so that's the first full floor, which you can see there's got 5 bedrooms and a shared kitchen living room, and then the next one up is the rooms within the roof space, which again is 5 ensuite rooms, and one room which is just simply identified as room, which I imagine would be used, we imagine would be used for storage and the like. We have actually included a condition to say that shouldn't be used as a bedroom because it doesn't have satisfactory outlook. And these are the front and rear elevations and side elevations, and I think that's it in terms of those slides. If you wouldn't mind just moving back to that plan, please. Sorry, that one. That's great. Thank you. So the uses are acceptable in principle in policy terms. We feel the external appearance of the site is being improved quite a bit as a result of the development. There are a significant number of objections, and I understand we've got speakers, so I won't go over those again, but the report explains why we feel the impacts that are raised in those objections aren't adverse and don't lead to a refusal recommendation. So in conclusion, Chair, the recommendation is approval. I need to draw members' attention to supplementary item 2 on the agenda, which is quite lengthy, so I won't go through it all. But we've had 7 additional letters of objection since the publishing of the agenda report. And actually, since publishing this supplementary, we've had another one which I'll have to report verbally, which came very late, but just in time for me to do that. So the additional comments listed there, most of them are reiterating concerns that were expressed in previous correspondence. And in fact, one of them did just literally append their previous comments. We have responded to the additional representations below where we feel that they're raising potentially new issues. So one of them was around asbestos. There was quite a few people concerned about the demolition of the existing building and the impact of if there is asbestos within the building. And that's not a material consideration in planning. It's covered by building regulations and the control of asbestos regulations. So it's not something that we have any influence over, and we have to assume the other bodies will take care of that. One comment was related to bike storage, and we've explained that there is sufficient bike storage for staff and residents within the building, and that's secure. But we felt that the recent objection did make a reasonable point about the opportunity to provide some cycle parking, short stay cycle parking for any customers visiting the shop. So we have recommended a condition be added to that effect, Chair. There is a report correction. Alison Teal, then Councillor Alison Teal, was referred to in the report as Councillor Alison Teal because her comments were made on the application when she was a councillor, but that's no longer the case since May. In condition 2, there's a need to delete a reference which is in error. And then there are 2 additional conditions, Chair. One relates to the cycle parking that I referred to previously, and the second is to prevent permanently fixed features for the display of goods without them being first approved by the planning authority. What we want to avoid there is something which is unattractive that's there on a permanent basis, Chair. So that's the introduction as it stands.
Thanks, Chris. We have 2 speakers. The first speaker being Alex Home, if you'd like to. Benny. Just press the right hand button. No. No, it's not working. Try the other desk. That don't matter how it is done. You have 5 minutes, Alex.
To 82 Coniston Road and the wider neighbourhood. I'm the homeowner and resident of 76 Coniston Road. Firstly, I raise the significant issue of inadequate window separation between the development and the Coniston Road properties behind. Please see the handout plan. The shortest distance stands at 10.5 metres from the main off-shop window of the development to my off-shop kitchen at 76 Coniston. This is half the distance required to maintain the privacy of existing residents stated in Sheffield City Council's supplementary planning guidance, that being 21 metres This significantly infringes on the privacy of a main living space. As you can see from the handout plan, house numbers 72 to 78 Coniston Road are all affected by window separation to main living areas that fall short of 21 metres. 13.4 metres to the dining room of 76, 11.5 metres to the off-shop kitchen of 74, 17.6 metres to the dining rooms of 78 and 74, and 18 metres to the dining room of 72. The same distances are true of the overlooking of main living spaces on the upper floors. Even for house numbers 70 and 80 Coniston Road, the distance between the windows set back from the main offshot of the development and their rear windows stands still at only 20 metres and 19.5 metres respectively, which is still short of the required 21 metre separation distance. The planning officer compares the protrusion of the main offshot of the development to those of the properties located to the north and south of the site. However, the only offshot that protrudes to the same distance is that of 723 Abbeydale Road. Please see the handout plan. Notably, this property overlooks a tile workshop and not a residential property. Those to the north do not protrude as far, and they also overlook a car workshop and not a residential property. I would also query the fact that the planning department has only stipulated the developer maintain half a pane of frosted glass in the main offshot window. See the rear elevation on the plan. Not only does this fail to mitigate for any overlooking, but the rear-facing windows of the Abbeydale Road properties to the north and south of the site contain fully frosted glass. The 6 rear windows of the development that will overlook the Coniston Road properties will also overlook their gardens at much shorter distances than the windows. I'm a keen gardener, as are my neighbours in this row of terraces, and we are constantly using our gardens, even in winter. We regard them as extensions of our homes. This is an infringement of privacy. Not only that, the proposed roof uplift will greatly and detrimentally overshadow the properties to the rear, blocking light from our gardens and homes, affecting our ability to grow various fruit and veg and plants. A major concern for residents of Coniston Road is that the top part of the rear wall of the existing structure at 717 Abbeydale appears to be composed of asbestos. Please see the photograph on the other handout. I have raised this, but so far it has not been addressed. How will this be removed safely, and will residents be expected to cooperate, given the fact that invasive ivy is growing through the asbestos and entangled in the roofs of the adjoining outhouse buildings of Coniston Road to the rear? What assurances can be given to residents, given the lack of communication from the planning department? Whilst I understand the intention of only including cycle parking in this development could be considered an attempt to fulfil Sheffield City Council's sustainability targets, in reality, the use of bicycles and public transport cannot be mandated. Therefore, it is likely that the 10 residents will be the owners of 10 cars and potentially 20 cars if there is more than one resident per room. Where will these cars park? This will exacerbate known parking issues on Coniston and Langdale roads. Where is the outdoor amenity space for residents of the development? We all have gardens and yards, why can't they? The properties to the north and south of the development all have backyards or gardens. Please see the handout plan again. I'm also concerned by the lack of notification that the neighbourhood have received. Number 82 Coniston, who shares the same backyard as myself, and number 74, who's located directly behind the development, were not even notified. Lastly, I'm aware of postal objections that were sent to the planning department that have not been logged for numbers 68 and 82 Coniston Road. I typed the postal objection for the gentleman at number 82 as he had been in hospital for a heart condition at the time. Where are these objections? Have more been lost? I've reprinted this and got him to sign it again. There were 46 objections at last count and 48, including the lost postal objections. This is significant and is a high amount of opposition and should certainly be taken into account, given only 18 properties were notified. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Our next speaker is Ali A. You have 5 minutes.
It will be shortly. Thank you, Chair. First, I have respect for the planning officer the report and the recommendation for approval. And I'd like to draw the attention, gentleman, he said that this building is actually existing building roof with demolition, new proposal roof, flat roof. Our new building, first floor on the front side. If officers show the existing and the proposal side plan or elevation, we can see. Yeah, existing rear elevation, please. Yes, it's far away. With demolition, existing, because this is the gym hall. Existing roof demolition and the rear side exactly is flat roof. It is not affected for the rear side building and the owner, because when we received the objection, planning officer drew the attention to me on the left side, the triangle side, is a two-story building. I registered just ground floor. One floor, we lost it. Technically impossible for the affected neighbor building because already we have got existing building. Existing building and the big pitch roof with demolition with the flat roof. New building, proposal new building, front side just. And others, I'd like to draw the attention to committee. More than 1 year, this property is the door is shut, the applicant has lost so much business. And now the building, the under damage, the water leaking, anytime it can collapse. The wall is very dangerous. We are waiting your decision. And I have respected the neighbor people, the objection, but impossible for the affected there. Because already we have got existing building. And we register, the existing is high, now the proposal is come down. On the plan we can see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. I will respond to a few points that were made, and I'll ask Helen to come in if she will, please, on the car parking issue. The first point, and I think the main point made by Alex Holm, was in relation to the and obviously handouts being given showing the distances. So within the report, we concentrate on some slightly different distances, which are, and I'll come on to that in a moment. So the 10.5 metre distance, we haven't, I'm not questioning that, but we haven't verified it as being from off-shot to off-shot, if you like, as shown in that plan. The measurements we've quoted are 13 and 13.4, I think it is, from the off-shot to the main rear wall of the terrace, which is essentially the first floor. And we've also quoted 17.6 metres from the I wish I could point on these screens, Chair. So let me start again. So on that image that's shown, if you wouldn't mind going back one more, Alan, please. Thank you. On that image that's shown there, you can see a window in the end elevator. At the top of the page, there's a window in the off-shot. That is 13.6 metres from the first floor of the terraces on Coniston Road. And then if you come back to the main bulk of the building rather than the off-shot, there are windows there, and there are also windows in the roof space above. They're 17.6 metres from the first floor of the rear wall on Coniston Road. And the reason we refer to those measurements is because they are broadly comparable in height. So it's first floor to first floor, effectively. Where we don't necessarily disagree with the dimension that's put forward, as I say, I haven't verified it, but if you wouldn't mind moving a couple of slides on, please, Alan, next one there. We feel that the window, the ground floor building that's been built, the flat roof of that will obscure some of the view to those rear properties from the main bulk. So in other words, the angle looking down into the garden, the building will inhibit views directly into the garden from that wall that's furthest back. And the off-shot window is, as Mr. Horn said, is to be partially obscurely glazed. And one of the points he made, well, it was, I think, a question as to why that's only recommended to be half obscure glazed rather than fully obscure glazed. And that's because that window serves a habitable room. It's a person's main habitable room, so it's important that they get an outlook of sorts. And our condition recommends that it's obscure glazed up to a height of 1.7 metres above ground, above the floor level within the room, and that's consistent with government guidance on privacy when they talk about permitted development within the permitted development regulations. So the purpose of the half glazed window is to prevent a view out into the windows, but to allow a view up of rooftops, etc. So yes, a number of the distances are short of our guidelines, but we've explained in the report that that's a common feature of development in areas such as this and elsewhere amongst the terrace. A lot of those distances are at an angle laterally or vertically, so that does limit the ability to gain a clear view into those rooms. Overshadowing was mentioned, and I think that was the point that the second speaker was making, that the existing building has the gable end of the roof, which is on some of the images, that will be lowered actually and become a flat roof. So in the initial bit, closest to those rear yards of the properties on Coniston Road, it's our view that this will represent a slight improvement. Then the main bulk of the building, which is obviously taller, is further away, and we think that's almost a neutral impact in terms of immediate improvement in the bit closest to the gardens, and then the extra bulk being set that bit further away. It's also, during the negotiations, I think the point that was also being made by the second speaker was that the offshot used to be a gable form and it's now being changed to a hip to respond to those concerns. Outdoor amenity space, yes, there isn't any. Again, that's fairly common in flat accommodation above shopping uses in locations like this. It is a shortfall of the scheme, but we didn't think it was enough to say it wasn't acceptable. We were fearful that the flat roof there might be then pressure on the flat roof to become a terrace, and if it was 10 people in shared accommodation, that could be quite disturbing to residents. So we've effectively banned that with a condition on the recommendation to prevent that happening. Notification was undertaken in accordance with our statement of community involvement and our code of practice, and I think the reason that we notify everybody who has an adjoining boundary to the site. So the reason that a couple of terraces either side of the main block weren't notified is because they didn't share that boundary. And as for non-receipt of objections, I can't comment on that, Chair. I don't know why they weren't received. We certainly received, as was said, around 45 and subsequently more since. And you know, those two additional ones, I don't think would have made a significant difference to the volume of objections, and the content became quite common through the others as well. So, but I can't explain why they weren't received. If Helen wouldn't just mind responding on the parking situation, Chair, and that we can't force people to use cycles.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, really, as I said with the previous application, we have certain areas where we feel that car-free development is appropriate. That's where there is good access to shops and good access to shops and services, good access to public transport, and this is viewed to be one of those sites. I would also point out that with the HMO designation, our car parking guidelines, which, as I said previously, are maximums, are 1 space per 4 to 8 bedrooms. So we would be looking at a maximum of 2 to 3 spaces. Now, if we take that as that's likely to be the demand, an extra 2 to 3 car parking space demand we wouldn't consider to be a highway safety or capacity issue. So given the location, given the appropriate guidelines, we do feel that the site is perfectly acceptable from a highways perspective. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Alan. That opens up to members' questions. Members' comments. Brian?
You just missed me. I just jumped up for a question. It was in connection with bike storage, so there is a suggestion about a condition. Yeah, okay, that'll be an idea. But there's mention about secure storage. So is that in people's flats or not?
The cycle storage, Chair, is indicated on this plan. Yeah, I'll get on my chair. I think that's the easiest. This area here, which is accessed via a secure entrance here, which is one that was shown on the slides previously. So there's sufficient cycle parking there for, I think, 11 cycles, 10 or 11 cycles in that area there.
Sophie?
Sorry, I did miss it. Is it secure bike storage? And my question was, has there been any consideration to if there's going to be pavement parking bans in the future?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't catch the last bit of the question.
It was just on consideration to, I know there's been a lot of talk about pavement parking bans in this area and the suburbs that surround the city centre.
Okay, Chair, the first part of the question, yes, the cycle parking is secure. It's lockable within the building, but also that rear access yard is protected as well. And if Helen wouldn't mind answering on the pavement parking.
Chair, I can't answer because I don't know. As I say, they're in the city centre at the minute. Whether things roll out from there or not, I don't know because it's not something that I deal with. What I can say, though, however, is that if people do park on the pavement at the moment, not in the city centre, and it is an obstruction, then obviously it is a matter for the police.
Barbara? No? Brian?
Yeah, so a second question is, so there's a mention on page 91 of the use of red brick as the main facing material and appropriate roof materials. So it says that they're not specified up to now, but they can be secured through condition. So can they be secured through condition so that they are kind of appropriate to the area?
Yes, Chair. I'm just going to double check the condition reference number. It's condition 3, Chair. And yes, that's the way it's the vast majority of applications we receive, the applicant will indicate the material, but we condition the submission of details of that material so that we can be satisfied it's of sufficient quality.
Thanks, Chris. Any more questions? Comments? Think we move? Sophie?
Yeah, I did have a comment, and it's that I agree with some of the points raised by the objectors, that I don't think this is an appropriate development. In that I don't think it's necessary, needed, and it's something that we already have a lot of, and that there was indication that it would be better used as solely a restaurant without the dwellings on top. So it's the dwellings that I'd like to object to.
Any more comments? No. Can we move to the vote then, please? Mike?
For the application, Chair.
Brian?
I'm going to abstain on this application in terms of its amenity and overdevelopment.
Tony? Peter?
4, Chair.
Tony?
4, Chair.
Gary?
4, Chair.
Bob?
4, Chair.
Roger?
4, Chair.
Sophie?
Against due to overdevelopment.
Barbara?
4, Chair.
Cliff?
4, Chair.
I take that as carried. Yeah, thank you. That's carried. We move along now to item 7D. Oh, we let them out.
No.
Oh, of course. Sorry, I forgot. Right, we go along to item 7D, application number 20/03276/FUL, Kenwood Hall Hotel, Kenwood Road, Sheffield, S7, page 97 of the agenda. Over to you, please, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Alan, would you mind moving on to the first slide, please? Thank you. So the site's identified there. Members will be familiar with it. I know some visited the other day, yesterday. It's in a housing area in policy terms. It's within the Netheredge Conservation Area, right in the middle of the Netheredge Conservation Area. The grounds to the hotel are a historic park and garden on our local list. So we have supplementary planning guidance that came with the UDP in 1998, dealing with historic parks and gardens. It's not on the national list of registered parks and gardens, which are similar to listed buildings in terms of status, but it is a non-designated heritage asset as identified in the National Planning Policy Framework. The red line shown there isn't the extent of development as such. The development is concentrated, or the main portions of the application are concentrated in that lower triangle of land, which is within the. It has trees to the north and east, and housing to the west, and it contains a former kind of back of house kitchen garden facility associated with the main garden, the historic garden. The proposal is for 4 detached dwellings, contemporary dwellings within the grounds, 2 4-bedroom, 1 5-bedroom and 1 6-bedroom dwelling. There are significant objections as set out in the report. but quickly summarising the object of the principle, the ecological impact, including tree loss, living conditions for neighbouring properties, particularly on Cherry Tree Road to the west. Are we all right, Chair? And highway safety. So the housing use is acceptable in principle, it's housing area, and the buildings to be demolished are of no significant merit. It might be worth just going slowly through the slides to show the main features of the site, Chair. So this view and the next one are actually outside the site, looking back towards it. So the site is on the right. Well, it's beyond that, the more dense kind of spread of shrubs there. That's the kind of the boundary of the site, and the lawn to the foreground is outside the site, but it's part of the formal garden. Then this is more of the same. These are all taken from outside the site. This is now inside the site. So the properties there are those on Cherry Tree Road, a range of detached and semi-detached properties that share a boundary. You can see there, fenced boundary with the site. The next slide shows more of those. And then coming round to the next one, you can begin to see existing buildings on the site, down on the right-hand side, and the next few just show more of those. So the buildings themselves are of no significant merit, and we don't object to their demolition. And you can probably see from this that it's recently been used as an allotment garden, as part of an arrangement between the hotel and local residents, but that arrangement, according to the hotel as applicant, has now ceased. So there's quite a lot of images here, I'm afraid. So just that's the view of the site, where you can currently gain a pedestrian entrance into the site. The next image is an access road that exists, which hasn't been used much recently, but is capable of being used by the hotel at any time they have an access right over it, and that goes out onto Cherrybank Road. Did I say Cherrybank then? Cherry Tree Road. It's currently blocked off, as you can see there, although it is opened occasionally and was yesterday for the members' site visit. This is a view, you can see here where the stone wall is. This is the redevelopment of the stable block to the north. And the trees there, so, one of the main impacts of the development is loss of trees. The majority of those trees in the centre of that shot would disappear as part of the development, and where the white van is where, roughly speaking, the first dwelling would be sited. The trees to the left in the foreground retained, those to the right are retained, but those in the kind of centre would be largely removed. This is actually on the edge of the site, adjacent to the parkland formal garden. This is the entrance to the site from Cherry Tree Road, Kenwood Road Junction. I must correct an impression I gave I apologise for this, at the members' site visit yesterday. I got my one way the wrong way around. So this is actually intended to be the entrance to the site for these 4 units, with exit onto Kenwood Road, and that's because this is seen as the safer point of access. That access actually leads, you can see here on the left, a lodge building, which the current hotel has the ability to use this access, doesn't greatly, but this development would rely upon. And you can see there you may just be able to pick out an orange line, a double orange line showing the existing alignment, and that proposal shows that plan shows that there'll be a slight shift in the location of that access road once you get into the site. You can see there the position of the 4 houses, and the next slide shows them in a slightly greater scale, and then the last couple of three are elevations. So you can see it's a contemporary form, largely two-storey with a three-storey element that's set back and small elements of single-storey. A lot of glazing. This elevation, the next one would overlook the next one along Ellen would overlook the the sort of formal lawn area, and there would be hedge planting in between. And the final one, I think this is the final. Yes, the final one shows cross sections. So you can see here, the bottom one shows the height of the houses on Cherry Tree Road versus the relative to, the height of the proposed accommodation. So you can see it's set down quite a bit, following, well, naturally, but also following some further regrading that's planned. I won't go into the key issues, Chair, because I think they're set out in the report, and I think we've got speakers, so that'll probably bring some of them out as well.
Thanks, Chris. We have a speaker, Sharon Watson, if you like.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I do need to relate to the, or read out the supplementary. Apologies. There is a correction in the report. It's the same as before with reference to Alison Teal, previously being referenced as Councillor Alison Teal. We have received an additional representation, which included some photographs of felled trees, stated by the objects to be oak, sycamore and pine with TPOs in place. And that's on an adjacent site, which is actually the stable block. And that slide there is very useful. So I'll just get out my chair, Chair. The trees that have been referred to have recently been felled are here. So they're outside the application site. They aren't a factor for this application. But to let members know our view of that, we've said here in the response that the trees weren't and aren't subject to the TPO. They're not, and I need to correct that. They're not subject to the TPO individually. There is a group TPO on the whole site. They are protected by virtue of being within the conservation area, and were indicated for retention on the approved plans in that other development. So we're going to be, it's in different ownership. It's a different application. It's not relevant to this scheme, and we will be investigating that. There's also a video that came with the representation demonstrating the diversity of bird life present in the trees destined for removal, which the object says is contrary to the statement in the ecological assessment. The video, we can't show it, Chair, but it pans around the site. You can hear bird song clearly. The ecological assessment did confirm that the trees provided suitable nesting habitat for a range of common birds, Chair, so I'm not sure what the difference there is in that comment. And then finally, Chair, a recommendation to delete a rogue asterisk and some brackets from condition 11. Apologies, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. Right, Sharon, you've got 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. So my name is Sharon Watson, and I'm here today to represent the Kenwood Community Growers and Nether Edge Sustainable Transformation. I'd like to start by setting the record straight in relation to the Planning Officer's report, which states that the use of the site as a community garden has ceased. The reason it ceased is because the growers were ordered to leave to enable this application to have fewer objections. The impact that this has had is that all the food grown voluntarily and donated to Foodworks for the benefit of the community has ceased. We are the recipients of community funding from local co-op members, and we may be in a position of having to return over £5,000 due to having no suitable alternative site. The Environment Act passed into law last November, introducing legislation which will require developments to demonstrate biodiversity net gain. As a green city and a progressive council, surely we need to think about this. Under the new legislation, would this development be given consent? If the answer is no, and yet we agree to this development today, we will be going against what the future requires of us, the preservation of species abundance. I've spent 2 years regularly gardening and working on the site. There are over 30 species of wildflower, 46 identified bird species, including the song thrush, the tawny owl, and the dunnock, which are red or amber on the government's list of woodland birds of conservation concern. We are extremely concerned about the impact of the tree removal and hedgerows around the perimeter of the site. Chris mentioned the group TPO in relation to trees on the site, and yet on the adjacent stable block development, every tree and every scrap of vegetation, including mature specimens, has been removed. Furthermore, because I saw it and I have evidence of it, those trees were removed in May at the height of the bird nesting season. We are dismayed by the cynical arrangement to reduce further development's Block A to a 7-unit scheme to remove the requirement for affordable housing across the development. There are currently over 300 houses priced between £300,000 and £2 million on the market in Sheffield. Do we need this development? How will vehicles fit through the archway of on the current proposed system of a one-way entrance and exit? How will emergency vehicles fit? How will the dustbin fit without knocking down a historic arch? For too long, this council has made planning decisions guided by the principles of the NPPF without a local plan in place to control development and protect communities, ensuring the right homes in the right places. One of the principles of the updated NPPF 2019 is that development resulting in loss or deterioration of irreplaceable habitats should be refused unless there are wholly exceptional reasons. This is a historic greenfield site. What is the success rate of relocating badger sets? Where is the evidence to support it works? How does this planning proposal balance the destruction of bird and insect habitat and removal of biodiversity in any meaningful way? When will the council create a local plan to serve local people and future generations instead of the pockets of developers? Or are we going to wait for this government to write one for us?
Thank you, Sharon. Chris, would like to respond, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I won't respond to every point because a lot of it's debated within the report, Chair. In terms of the Environment Act and Biodiversity Net Gain, there is an encouragement for biodiversity net gain already within the NPPF, paragraph 174. But the act that Sharon referred to there comes into force in November next year. And so would it be given consent if that was in force? Now, well, the requirement of the Act is it's intended to be a 10% gain, biodiversity net gain. Now, that can be delivered, the mechanics of all that are still being worked out, so it's almost a hypothetical situation, Chair, and difficult to answer, but I'll attempt to do so to give some response to the question. It could be provided on site, it could be achieved on site within the development, or there is also an ability, it would seem, for a developer to provide the net gain either elsewhere on other land that they own or even in some kind of off-site provision that will be managed presumably by the local authority, but that is still being worked out. So I don't think we can say that in November 23 this would be automatically resisted on biodiversity net gain grounds, is what I'm trying to say. Because there are all sorts of, the mechanics of it all is still being worked out. We've acknowledged that there is significant tree loss. The trees themselves were surveyed. The vast majority of them are removed, but a number are retained in and on the edge of the site. A lot of the trees are groups which need space and need at the very least some management in any event. And they couldn't, the applicants put forward a proposal. They put forward the proposal to remove them, and we don't feel that their loss alone is sufficient to resist the development. In terms of, there is some mitigation. I'm not suggesting it will go the full extent of replacing any lost habitats potential, but there's some mitigation in green roofs within the development, and also provision for additional things like bird back boxes that we often commonly utilise. Yes, there is a group TP over the site. I've already said that's what the work that's been undertaken, seemingly without consent, is subject to a separate investigation, and it is a different development by a different body. I'll ask Helen to come in shortly, if she will please, on the access arrangements and refuse vehicles. The badger set, I think, was the one final thing. So there is a badger set in the southern corner of the site. Any badger set is capable of being relocated under licence, and that's the plan here. The applicant obviously owns quite a lot of land within the grounds of the hotel, and the intention is that under licence with Natural England, that set would be relocated elsewhere in the normal way, Chair. And provided that's provided for within the scheme, that meets our requirements. So if Helen wouldn't mind responding on the vehicle activity, please.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, Chair. In terms of the one-way system, we do believe that that's actually the most preferable option in terms of highway safety. Specifically referring to service vehicles and refuse vehicles, this was something that was looked at previously, and we do accept that the normal Veolia type vehicle is not going to be likely to be able to get in there. It's going to have to be one of the smaller refuse vehicles. But there was some tracking carried out previously, and we are comfortable that it can be accessed. It is tight, I make no bones about that, but it isn't to the point where the site can't be accessed. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Helen. Right, we'll move to members' questions. Gary, then Sophie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I should be supporting the recommendation, Chair. It's just one thing I want to ask Chris. When I was on site, and you've apologised to saying that it were exit and exit on that other road, but you haven't said that there's two exits out of is there still two exits out of the development? Thanks.
So as you can't quite see all of this because the third one is off the page, but to the right of this is the main entrance into the hotel, which is a two-way entrance, and there's kind of a rumble strip in between gated main entrance into the hotel. The intention here is that vehicles would come into the site from the left-hand corner and come down the access road there, and then obviously visit their properties, and then exit via the route between block A and the stable block. So that's one point of entrance for this development, an entrance and exit for Block A, as I understand it. Helen might confirm that. And then the other main hotel entrance is off to the right. I think that's all correct, Chair, yeah.
Sophie?
Thank you. I'm sorry if I missed it. I just wondered if there was a response to a few things mentioned in the application and the objections. Is there a response to the fact that growing hasn't stopped? So the group of growers hasn't stopped on site by choice. And did this group actually need in law to stop growing? Were they ordered to take their activity off the site? And is a response to the point that it isn't accurate to say that nobody is using this site currently if they were ordered off site? More of a comment for later, but this council has passed various motions on the right to food and the cost of living crisis. I'm aware that probably doesn't affect planning law, but to me it doesn't feel right to approve something so extremely luxurious and unneeded when there's a group that's using this site to tackle the problems that we're facing in the rest of the city. Is there a response to the badger sets that were raised in the objections? And can I clarify that we don't know if this development will be approved in 2023? So it's unclear yet. And then Helen, it was just on the smaller vehicles for waste. Is this covered in the Veolia contract? I just don't know how that works. Do they have to send out a different delivery van? Just a little bit more on that, please.
Chair, in terms of the current use of the land by the community, that's an arrangement between the landowner and the community, and it's outside our influence and isn't a matter for consideration as part of the application. The badger set, yes, I think as I said earlier, it will be relocated but under licence. So they can't do it unless they do it, they can't carry out the development until the badger set is removed, and unless the badger set is removed, and they can't move the badger set unless it's under licence with Natural England, so it's all properly monitored and timed, etc. In terms of would it be approved in 2023, we don't know what the mechanism is going to be and exactly what the rules are going to be. It's all based upon a base assessment and metrics that feed into that, and then a comparison with the proposal. And then, as I say, there's also intended to be the ability for a developer not to comply with it on site, but to comply with it elsewhere. So we really don't know what this developer could come forward with if that was the case. So to answer the question, is it correct we don't know if it will be approved in 2023? The answer is definitely yes, we don't know.
Thanks, Craig. Helen?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the smaller vehicles, I mean, Veolia normally use 16.2 metre refuse vehicles. So if we were designing an adoptable layout, that's what we would look to accommodate in terms of the road layout. Obviously, with developments like this, the roads are not to an adoptable standard, would never be to an adoptable standard, and therefore we can sort of accept a smaller refuse vehicle being used. Generally, they're about 8 metres in length. It may be that the developer can arrange that with Veolia. It may be a private waste contractor. But what I'm saying is that it is something that they will have to manage, as the roads will never be adopted. And so we can sort of say, well, yeah, in this instance, we can look towards using the small refuse vehicles.
Thanks, Helen. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. What rights will the residents have to use what is basically a private road, which is owned by the landowner, to access their properties and to leave the site? And I have another question, which is about, the badger set, would the badger set be relocated within the grounds of this place, or would they be looking to move it off-site altogether?
Chris?
Chair, it would be within the grounds. It would have to be within a nearby location for it to be acceptable to Natural England. And the rights to, I mean, I think we have to assume that an applicant's putting forward a development on land that they own, and with an access road that they have a right to use. And so we haven't questioned what their right is to use that, because it's part of their proposal, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. Got you, Barbara.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, I really want clarification on the one-way system, because when I asked directly yesterday, sort of the manager, and he said there'd be one entrance to the site, which would be the main hotel site for all traffic, and the exit point would be through the stable block and onto Cherry Tree Road. Now, I'm not so sure that it would affect a decision on the site, but I think I think it needs clarifying. And when I said sort of which exits would the new development use, he said the two on the left would more likely find the road exit to Cherry Tree more convenient than the exit onto Kenwood. And the point being, sort of, it's the movements past the lodge, because they've had a very quiet existence, certainly for the last couple of years. And lots of movement, if that is the way into the site now, would be quite detrimental to him. And there's another thing, but do you want to answer that one first?
Sorry, Chair, was the second bit, sorry?
Well, it's a slightly different point. I mean, it's a concern, really, but yeah, I mean, the garden was wonderful because it's been tended, food being produced. But my concern as a general point of principle, if there has been a private arrangement between a community group and a private landowner about use of the site for this, if we then sort of say that because it has been used for a couple of years, that's a planning condition, which I don't think it is, but that would stop future developments where land could be used for growing purposes, sort of for a temporary basis. So I just want, it's a concern, but I don't think it's a planning thing. It's purely a private arrangement, isn't it?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I too was confused yesterday on site, as you probably gathered, with the chap who was representing the applicant and his comments. And when I came back to the office and reread the report, I realised that he was saying something different to what was written in the report. But it's our understanding from dealing with the applicant's team, mine, the case officer, and Helen's, that the one-way arrangements are as we've described today. There is actually a condition on the permission which requires full details of the one-way system. But that was mainly around kind of signage and how it will operate, how it will be managed, etc. But it's our understanding that is how it would operate. So in terms of the impact on the lodge as a result of this development, it's obviously it's only for the 4 houses. Yes, they're quite large houses, but it would be entrance to those properties past the lodge, which would be then on the left on the way in. I'll answer a bit more on the garden thing, and then if Helen wants to come in on that, she can. But it looks like she's itching to do so now.
Chair, all I was going to say is I can confirm that because I've looked at it this morning, in the transport statement that was submitted with the application, that it is definitely in off Cherry Tree Road and out onto Kenwood, and there's actually a plan in the transport statement which shows that. So.
Thanks, Helen. I think maybe the guy representing wasn't quite sure of what was happening and got it slightly wrong, but it confused me too. Yeah, it is a private arrangement between the two. I've not really thought about what would happen if it was there long enough for it to become an established use in planning terms, but you'd be talking about 10 years for something like that to even become a consideration. But as it stands at the moment, it's a private arrangement, like, you know, any individual might let their neighbour use their garden for something for a temporary period. And then if they decide they can no longer do that, then they tell them that's the case, and that's our understanding of what's happened here.
Do we have any more questions? Brian?
Yeah, I've got one main question, which is to follow up on the question that that one of the people who was speaking said, which is about the success rate of relocating badger sets. And, you know, how successful are they at being moved from one area to another? If can I answer on that? I don't know if you know, Chris.
I don't have any data on that, Chair, but it's English nature's sort of approved way of dealing with things, so I assume it's high.
First of all, I think one of my concerns, is about the species that are there at the moment and have, you know, like it's been there, even though it's a private arrangement between the two groups. My only concern is, again, it being there, and then also the wildlife. Has there been any discussions with the landlord in terms of how best to, you know, so it doesn't have a negative impact on that? Has there been further discussions?
Chair, what we've done in terms of, or what we required the applicant to do in terms of the site as it stands at the moment, is do both a tree survey and an ecological appraisal, which is now getting quite old, and I'll come on to that very briefly. But the ecological appraisal, the main thing it identified was, in terms of protected species, was the badger set. Assessment was done of other things. I acknowledged that the site had wildlife value. It wasn't saying it didn't. But in terms of protected species, it was just the badger set. One of the conditions, I don't have the number to hand, so I'll just quickly look. I said it's getting a little long in the tooth. They have ecology surveys have a shelf life, because obviously things can change. So condition 18 says that where the development starts more than 2 years from the date of the protected species survey, which is the key point, or if the development ceases, because often a development can get on site, Chair, and then pause for whatever reason. If it ceases for more than 12 months, a further species survey has to be undertaken, the development has to stop. So this survey is dated October, I think I'm right in saying, 2020. So we're a good kind of 18, I think, months into that, 20 months perhaps, into that period. So it's more than likely that condition 18 will kick in, and they will have to resurvey the site before commencing development, in order to then take account of any additional species that might have inhabited the site in the meantime.
No, Barbara?
One other point. I mean, sort of the affordable housing, I mean, sort of it was commented on that sort of the numbers had been reduced to bring it underneath the requirement to have social housing. Now, I made the comment yesterday, as a business model, it's really desirable to have many more houses in that location. So is this a precedent? Does that mean that sort of the way that you have included the 3 developments in that area all constitute as one block for social housing purposes. Is that sort of what you would employ in the future? Should a new application come in to develop further bits of the site? Or will that be decided if and when it happens?
Chair, the reason that became an issue, that the affordable housing became an issue, was our threshold for considering an affordable housing requirement for developments is 15 units. And within our SPG, and I think this hopefully answers the question, within our SPG, we essentially say that a developer shouldn't disaggregate sites to try and get around the affordable housing provision. So in other words, a developer might have a site that he or she wishes to develop 20 units on, which is obviously more than 15, but they might decide to split them into 3 separate applications so that none of them individually exceed the threshold of 15. This particular development, so we've got the stable block, which is on site at the moment and has, I think I'm right in saying, 3 units. Block A to the left had a permission for 9 units, so we're up to 12 there, and these 4 would have taken it to 16. So that would have triggered an affordable housing requirement that would have taken into account the 3 developments in one go. So the developer has decided to reduce the numbers in block A down to 7. So you've then got 3 plus 7 plus 4 is 14. And that is below the 15 threshold, which is perfectly legitimate. And they've also entered into a legal agreement which rescinds, if that's the right word, Vicky might correct me, the 9 unit approval in block A. In other words, they can no longer implement that even though it's still within time. So does that set a precedent? It's almost the other way around. The supplementary planning guidance required us to follow that approach here, and it would continue to do so elsewhere with other similar, because we get quite a few situations where developers attempt to disaggregate sites. Has that answered the question, Chair?
The original sort of site plan you had quite a large area enclosed in the red. And I just wanted to see whether sort of what you're saying about disaggregation would apply to everything that was proposed for within that red boundary, or is it just happened? No, it's the earlier. Keep going back. Whoops. I don't know. That's it. Right. Would that decision cover everything that's within that red boundary there? So if there's new application for another patch to be developed, then automatically it would be classed as this one site.
Chair, if we received another application, we would consider questions like land ownership. Is it in the same ownership? Is it the same development essentially, albeit phased? We'd have to take account of passage of time and other factors. But to answer your question, if we suddenly got a development in, let's say, sake of argument, the 2 orange blocks there, the 2 pieces, the bit of land to the northwest of that image, if we got an application for that site, that would more than likely be in separate ownership and a separate developer, so it wouldn't kick in there unless it of itself was more than 15 units. But anything else within the site, let's say they abandoned this 4 development scheme, assuming it was approved, and decided they wanted, as was the earlier proposal, an apartment scheme there, then that would almost certainly trigger the affordable housing requirement, yes.
My thinking is sort of, does it protect further development of the site from further development, or is it purely, in this instance, that's happened, that's all. And I think that's going to be a comment rather than an answer.
it won't prevent further development because that would have to be assessed on its own merits at the time. But I think it deals with the existing situation in terms of affordable housing, definitely.
Do I have any further questions? No? Can I open up now to comments, please? Brian?
Thank you, Chair. I've got two main concerns over this, and it's to do with the style of the buildings and the impact on the heritage of what is a designated historic landscape. It's not listed, but it's designated. It's important. There's no traditional aspects whatsoever to the building. They're blocky, they've got flat roofs, they're not appropriate, and they're not very good on their carbon zero either, as far as I can see. They're on a minimum of 10%, and it could be better. So there's that aspect which I'm concerned about. And of course I'm concerned about the ecological impact, because we're losing an enormous amount of woodland here. There's not only going to not be a woodland, there's not even going to be a woodland barrier or boundary, it seems. There's so much going to be lost there. And that will have impact, as it's been said, on birds, on bats, on small mammals, on the badger set, which we mentioned earlier. That's been shifted, and there's no proof that that's going to survive in a new location. So I will not be voting for this development on those two grounds.
Thanks, Brian. Peter?
I've been, ever since the visit yesterday, I've been tossing this one backwards and forwards, and I just don't know which way. Anyway, on balance, I'm afraid I'm going to oppose this. I think on the damage it's to the ecology and the biodiversity, the loss of all them woodlands, it's a super area. And I think it's just too much just for 4 houses, and so I'm going to oppose it, Chair.
Roger?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think we've already passed this for outline planning permission. I am very reluctant about this, and I do know about badgers because I've had one in my garden, and they do tend to go to the same place every year. So I don't know who's going to tell Mr. Badger his new address, but I hope that when Mr. Badger finds out that his old house or dwelling place is no longer there, that there will be a signpost there saying, Mr. Badger, your new home is over there. I don't know how this works, just like Brian, but I hope that somebody has the knowledge to be able to relocate the badger, and I hope that if it, that he's satisfied with his new house. I'm not happy about the redevelopment of this as a green, because it's a wonderful green space. But as I say, we've already given outline planning permission, so it is with great reluctance I'm going to support it.
Any further comments?
Chair, could I ask that you go back to the planning office to clarify whether outline permission has already been granted on the site? Thank you.
Chris?
Chair, there is no outline permission for development of this particular site. The permission is for the previous permissions on the site have been for the stable block, which is now on site being built, and with the former banqueting hall suite, which is the building alongside it, the light grey coloured building that was on that image that Alan had displayed. There has been a previous application on this site insofar as the application for Block A, which is the hall that fronts Kenwood Road, also included initially 27 flats on this particular site. So the site we're looking at 4 houses now. There was originally a proposal for 27 flats. We were concerned about that, and they removed that from the scheme. So there has been no outline approval on this particular site.
Can I just clarify that? I know we gave outline planning permission for something. Okay, this is better than the flats. Okay, I'll accept that. Are you saying then that there was no outline planning permission just for the houses? Or no outline, there was no outline planning permission before?
That's correct, Chair. There is no outline planning permission on the site.
Well, what did we do before? Because we've visited this site before.
Alan, would you mind just going... Yes, there, please. So, the reason I think for members' visit previously was, I think, to look only at this side here. I don't think members returned to look at this one. So it was the visit to this stable block here, possibly that one as well. They're the two previous permissions on the site. The permission for this unit did initially include a request to develop this with two further apartment blocks, but through the negotiation process and dealing with this application, that was deleted because it was felt to be too intense. So the only permissions relate to that block, and they were both full planning permissions. There hasn't been an outline permission.
Any further comments? No, yep.
Yeah, I just want to mention that just looking at everything, even though we do need more homes and affordable homes and everything, and I think I agree with some of the things mentioned that this group, Community Goers, is doing some fantastic stuff and working in the food and the crisis and everything. I think there's a lot to lose, even more so, especially the wildlife. So I think it's too much to lose for those 4 houses. That's just my view.
Thank you. If there's no further comments, we'll move to a vote. No. Mike, start with you.
This is a difficult one, but I'm not convinced that the preservation of wildlife would stack up on this occasion. I'm going to vote for the recommendation.
Brian?
I'll be voting against the development of this site.
Okay.
It is a hard one. I'm going to vote against it.
Jody?
I was particularly moved by Roger's tales of the riverbank reminiscences, so I'm going to vote against.
Peter?
Voting against, Chair.
Tony?
I'm going to vote against, Chair.
Gary?
For, Chair.
Bob?
For, Chair.
After the explanation, I've decided to withdraw and abstain.
Sophie?
For the same reasons demonstrated by Brian and Peter, against, Chair.
Barbara?
Against, Chair.
Cliff?
Against, Chair.
Yes, okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. The vote on the officer's recommendation has been lost. Therefore, if a member of committee could move refusal of the application and state some planning reasons for those, and then I would suggest that you ask the planning officer to make some comments on those reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Are you moving, Peter?
Can I move that on grounds of UDP policy G11, which states that the natural environment should be protected and enhanced, that design and siting and landscaping development needs to respect and promote natural conservation. And I just think the demolition of all those trees is the opposite. I think it's a step too far. It doesn't protect the environment, and it does too much damage to the biodiversity.
Can I have a seconder, please? Brian? Brian? After I second it.
I'm happy to second, yes, very pleased to second.
Thank you, Chair. I would just ask that you invite the planning officer to discuss those reasons. And if we do proceed to a vote to refuse, I would like the final wording, the objection, to be delegated to the planning officer and the co-chairs. Thank you.
Please, Chris.
Chair, sorry, I didn't quite catch the UDP policy reference, that was all. Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, that clearly there's a significant loss of trees on the site as part of the scheme. G11 is still a relevant policy. It has similar aims and aligns with the relevant paragraphs in the MPPF, which off the top I don't know, Chair.
I'll just assist. Can I just assist Chris there with paragraphs 174 and 180?
Yes, thank you. So it aligns with those. So it's a policy which is applicable. Clearly, we've referred to it within the report, and the issues. There is a reason there that I'm comfortable with. I'm not sure it's for me to say, Chair, but Councillor Holmeshaw also mentioned heritage impact. I think most people seem to refer to ecological impact. Councillor Holmeshaw also referred to heritage impact. I don't know if that's something...
Can you mention the tree preservation order, which is on a whole lot of those woods as well?
Yeah, well, the tree preservation order, Chair, is part of the picture in terms of landscape impact. Landscape impact in this sense obviously leads into consideration of the impact on the historic garden, and a number of members raised that point. So I took it that members were concerned about that impact as well as just the fact that there are trees and the wildlife aspect of it. I don't know if members want to confirm that.
Yeah, can I? Because it was highlighted in your report, the fact it was sort of a pretty sort of extensive garden design by Maddox. I always get names wrong, yeah. Always. But the additional concern for me was that sort of all that damage just for 4 homes. I mean, if it just didn't seem to balance. There's no balance there. But can we actually sort of ask for anything to be done, because it's the heritage, to restore that to its original form, like we have in some places? But that's outside the planning, I should think. Or can we make a comment to allude to the fact that it would be nice to see it restored to its previous state?
The significance of Marnock is that there are several landscapes in the Sheffield area, particularly in the Nether Edge and Sharrow areas, that Marnock was involved with, and some of them had some fantastic restoration projects, including the Botanical Gardens and Sheffield General Cemetery, I'm just about to say.
Chair, thank you. I think the proposal there was for refusal, so based on G11, which was around the loss of the trees, the environmental and biodiversity impacts. But I think Chris has just raised a point there about the heritage and the historic garden, and obviously I presume that would mean the conservation area as well. I think it may be useful for members to discuss that aspect and decide if they want to add that to the reasons for refusal. If that's the case, then somebody will need to propose the reasons already been put forward, possibly also the heritage aspect, and then move on to the vote. Thank you.
I'm quite happy to propose that, because I do think it matters, especially in Sheffield. Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, I don't know if it's significant, but this CS47 relating to open space, but I don't know whether that's historic open space. I haven't got that in front of me.
We have a proposal.
I'm happy to second that.
Oh, thank you, Cliff.
I don't know if you can find an answer, or maybe at a later time, Chris, on CS47. I don't know whether it's significant or not. It's a city policy, isn't it?
Chair, I just need to remind myself of what that says. Is it referenced in the report on a particular page?
Yes, Chris, it does crop up, but I haven't noted the page.
You didn't mean 74, did you?
I've got CS 47 written here. Within the Sheffield Development Framework course, it's the core strategy.
Chair, we refer to CS 74, which is... Chair, CS 74 is design principles. That relates to maintaining distinctive features of an area. 47, I'm not sure we refer to, and off the top I can't recall exactly which one that is. I can find out, Chair.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've probably transferred the wrong number over when I wrote it down. But significant structures within an area.
I think we've got a proposal on the floor, and I think we need to vote on that proposal.
Thank you, Chair. I think it might just be useful for me to summarise where I think we are with that. I think the proposal here is, as Peter stated, his reason for refusal relating to GE11. I think Chris has then gone on to add those couple of NPP paragraphs, PF paragraphs to that. And then since that discussion, we've then moved on to a discussion about the heritage aspects in terms of the conservation area in the historic garden as well. So I think what the current proposal is refusing for those two reasons. Thank you.
I think we move to a vote for the second proposal. So we'll start again with you, Mike.
For the new proposal, Chair.
Brian?
Yeah, for the new proposal, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, for.
Tony?
For.
For.
Tony?
For.
Gary?
Abstain.
Roger? Sophie?
For, please, Chair.
Barbara?
For.
Cliff?
For.
Yeah, that proposal's carried. Right, the next on the agenda, so that's two down. Record of planning appeals submissions and decisions. Do I have any? Chris?
Chair, we just note them normally, but these are just received. There aren't any outcomes, I'm afraid. It's not very exciting this time.
Thank you. Date and time of next meeting is the 12th of July, 2022, 2 p.m. Thank you.